Folks, quick check. Am I loud and clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, you're here.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, sir.
So maybe we can start the session, but before that, just a couple of decorums, folks. Since we are starting the session series for the first time, we'll keep the participation on. Please keep yourself on mute when you are not speaking. Just keep yourself on mute. You want to ask anything, you can raise hand and go ahead with your questions. Even unmute yourself during the discussion. That is completely fine. Just ensure that we need to kind of ensure that this is being recorded and will be used for a lot of you to kind of take a revision as well. And a lot of them who have missed the session. So it will be good if we can keep it short, simple, crisp questions. That is one part of it. And please don't open your videos. It's very, very important. Please don't open your videos. Okay, will that be okay?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes.
And I'll be requesting a lot of times that are you all with us or are you all with me? And I would like to hear everyone yes. Okay, so that
Yes, sir.
everyone is
Yes.
there and participating. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right, perfect. So let's start then. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining in. This is CIA Part 1 session series. We are starting with the first and the foremost Unit 1. So first of all, a very, very warm welcome to everyone to spend your Saturday evening with us. Today, we are going to start with the first unit, which is Foundation of Internal Auditing in the CIA Part 1. Folks, as I said, the total number of units in the earlier orientation program, the total number of units that is covered in the Part 1 is how many of them are there? There are total. Can anyone tell me who have attended the orientation program? How many units we have in Part 1?
7.
Total 7 units, right? So total 7 units we have. We are starting with the first one, which is Foundations of Internal Auditing. The total weightage of this unit is 15% in the examination, folks. We have 125 questions coming in the examination, out of which 15% is the weightage. The 15% is the weightage for the unit 1. Now let's try to understand that whether this weightage is fixed or not, because a lot of you will have this question. Okay, when we say 15%, are we going to expect about 15 to 20 question, or we are going to expect about 18, 19 exact 15% question in the examination? Folks, this is more an indicative percentage, but more or less this is a very important unit, and surely you will see a lot of questions coming in the examination. But this is indicative from an overall importance category point of view. It doesn't mean that okay, in the examination SSC you will have 18 questions or 19 questions, whatever it is. Out of 125, 15%, 18 point something, that many questions you will see in the exam. This is more indicative. But yes, this is very, very important from examination point of view. And you will see a lot of questions coming in from the examination. So the best part is between today's session and the next session, between session 1 and session 2, we are going to complete the entire unit 1 along with practicing a lot of MCQs. So just in the first 2 units, we are going to cover the 15% of the Part 1 program. That is how we have to see it. Now, what is Unit 1? What does Unit 1 cover, folks? So we have Unit 1 bifurcated into 8 subunits. Okay, what are these 8 subunits? So Foundation of Internal Auditing, it has 8 subunits. It has the 8 subunits are, it includes applicable guidance IPPF, Code of Ethical Conduct for Professionals. It includes a basic about internal audit ethics, as in what is introduction, what is the reason of Code of Ethical Conduct, what are the aspects of Code of Ethical Conduct, and what are the different principles of Code of Ethical Conduct. So that's the third subunit. After that, we'll understand in detail each of the Code of Ethics, which is integrity, objectivity, confidentiality, and competency. And the final topic would be Internal Audit Charter. So those are the 8 subunits that are there. There are total 21 pages in the GLIM content that we are going to cover end to end. Let me just, before getting into the content and in fact getting into the detailed learnings of it, let me just share, because here there's something that is written as proficient and basic. What does it mean? So normally each topic in the entire unit, and it will be any topic that you pick up from GLIM content, you will see that IIA have suggested that these subunits we will be testing at proficient level, and these subunits or these topics we will be testing at basic level. Now, how does that differentiate? It is just expected that basic means you should have knowledge of it. Proficient means you should have a thorough, it is like a very thorough knowledge. And how to practically apply it should be available. So that's why it's a basic difference between basic and proficient. But however, the way we will study, everything for us would become proficient. Okay, so that is how we have to focus on. Now, what are the key learnings, folks? That is what we are going to learn in today's session. In the first subunit, when we start with applicable guidance IPPF, where we are going to run applicable guidance of IPPF is International Professional Practice Framework. When we are going to read that, we are going to cover mission of internal auditing. We'll understand what does IPPF means. We are going to understand what are the 4 things that are included in the mandatory guidance. We'll understand definition of internal auditing, the core principles, the standards, and the code of ethics. So those are actually the 4 things that governs in the mandatory guidance. We are going to cover all of them. After that, we are going to cover the code of ethical conduct for profession. That will be our subunit 1.2, where we are going to cover what are the reasons for code of ethical conduct. What is the primary purpose of having the code of ethical conduct? So what is the primary purpose? This is very important to understand. And let me just take a pause here and try to share some perspective on this PPT, folks. Wherever it is underlined, which means that this is very important from examination point of view. Towards the end of the session series, we will consolidate and share you the list of important topics. But apart from that, whenever you see this key learning slide, wherever it is underlined, this means this is more important from examination point of view. And the whole purpose of having the slides is whenever we complete the session, we'll come back on the slide and try to reflect back that whether we are able to locate, whether we are able to understand, yes, okay, mission of internal auditing, if it is written here, are we able to recollect our thoughts that yes, we have studied, we have understood this. When it says what does IPPF contains, whether we are able to recollect what we have learned. So that's the whole idea of having the key learning slides, which basically is sum up of the key aspects that are covered in the entire unit, and we have to come back on this and we have to recollect our thoughts that whether we have still remembered all this or not. Does that make sense? Yes? No? Are you all with me, folks? Alabya, Ankur?
Yes,
Can I
sir.
quickly hear the word yes from everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
So coming back on what are the key learnings, folks, and this is very, very important. And if you see a lot of things would have been underlined, the reason is this is very, very important topic. This is a topic that will set up a base for the next unit as well, which is independence, objectivity, due diligence, professional care, and all of it, competency. That is again very, very important. And together, if you see unit 1 and unit 2 itself is 55%. And that's the reason I'm saying all the 21 pages that we are going to read, it will be little repetitive, but the whole idea is it will give us a very good tone, and it will give us a very good learning, and it will be tested in lot of variety of ways in the examination as well. And that's why this unit become a very, very important from examination point of view. So let's come back and see that what are the key learnings that we are going to learn, and then we'll get into the detailed part of the understanding of each of these concepts. So as I said, applicable guidance of IPPF, we are going to understand mission of internal auditing, folks. We are going to understand what does IPPF contains. So normally when we will study what does IPPF contains, we'll understand that it contains mandatory guidance and it contains recommended guidance. So as mandatory guidance is now very, very important. So that is where it includes 4 things. So what are the 4 things that gets included in the mandatory guidance? That is something that we are going to understand. So what are the 4 things that gets included? Are nothing but it includes the next 4 points, which is definition of internal auditing, the core principles, the standards, the code of ethics. How many core principles? How many types of standards? What are the difference among the standards? How many types of code of ethics? That is all that we are going to learn. Again, very, very important topics from examination point of view, as well as a internal audit profession, we should know this. This is very, very important. Moving on to the second subunit, when we are going to read code of ethical conduct for profession, we are going to cover reasons for code of ethical conduct, why the code of ethical conduct exists actually. What is the reason of having them? What is the primary purpose? There would be many purposes of it, but what is the primary purpose? And sometimes in the examination, the examiner may ask you that what is the primary purpose of code of ethical conduct, and that will give you much closer options. But you have to remember those keywords that no, primary purpose is this. So that is how we have to learn this. Then the next would be aspects of code of ethical conduct. To enhance code of ethics, it should provide for what? So there's another key word that says that, okay, to enhance code of ethics, it should provide XX condition. So what is that condition is something that we are going to learn, and that is something that we have to remember in the examination. After that, we are going to understand the components or elements of code of ethical conduct, which will include the integrity, objectivity, confidentiality, and competency, which itself becomes the next 1.3 to 1.7 subunits, which covers applicability or provisions of code of ethics. So I mean, here in this particular unit, we are going to understand, first of all, to start with, that to whom is this code of ethics applicable? Is it applicable to only CIA pass out students? Is it only included to IIA members? Or is it applicable to all those who are involved in the internal audit activity? So we are going to understand that in today's session. After that, we are going to understand the different principles of the code of ethics. Under each of these code of ethics, how many principles are in integrity, how many principles are in objectivity, how many principles are in confidentiality, how many principles are in competency. We'll learn them, we'll learn them as in we'll understand them, we'll remember them. That's again very important. After this would be examples of each of this. When will we say that, okay, we as internal auditors have violated the code of conduct as integrity? When we will say that we have violated the code of conduct as objectivity. So we'll understand with various examples the violation rules. When it will say that, okay, the auditor, internal audit activity or the internal auditor has violated the code of ethics, code of conduct. So we are going to understand that here. And the last one topic would be on internal audit charter, folks, where we are going to understand what is the purpose, authority, and responsibility, and what do we understand by recognizing mandatory guidance in the internal charter. You will surely see a couple of questions out of internal audit charter topic. You'll surely see some topics out of internal audit ethics in the examination. You will surely see some questions on the core principles, probably even a direct question on the mission of internal auditing. You can expect such questions in the examination. So that's why this unit becomes very, very important. So are you all clear what are the different things that we are going to learn today? Are we good? We have 41 folks. Thank you so much for joining in, folks. Once again, whoever was towards the later part of the session would join in. We'll just begin it, setting the perspective of what we are going to learn. Can I listen? Not many voices. Yes. Are you all clear what we are going to study today?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
Yes.
All right, perfect. So let's start. Before getting into the GLIM content, let's start very briefly with the help of presentations that what is IPPF. So folks, let's first of all speak it out together. What is the full form of IPPF? IPPF stands for International Professional Practices Framework. Okay, so only 2 voices. Folks, I need more voices. We have 40 plus members. Can you all read it together? We'll read and learn together in the session itself, okay? Apart from understanding content. So I need more and more participation. Can I have everyone it? What is the full form of IPPF? Can you all read it together?
International Professional Practice Framework.
The National Professional Practice Framework, right? Very good. Now let's understand what are the 2 things that gets covered under IPPF. It includes the mandatory guidance and recommended guidance. So anyone who asks you that, okay, what does IPPF contains? The answer is IPPF contains mandatory guidance and recommended guidance. Right. Now let's try to understand, folks. The units start with the mission of internal auditing. So we'll understand the mission of internal auditing, and we'll get into the types of guidance. So we'll cover mandatory guidance and recommended guidance. Now, mandatory guidance is very, very important in the examination. Under mandatory guidance, we have 4 things. What are the 4 things? I've already covered earlier. What are the 4 things? Can you say that together? It includes the
Definition of internal
auditing,
Core principles,
standards, and the code of ethics, right? So folks, we'll understand mandatory guidance, under which we have 4 important things, which includes definition of internal auditing, the core principles. There are total 10 core principles. We don't have to learn them. We have to understand them. Okay, we don't have to learn anything. It's all a MCQ paper. So we'll have to all understand it fundamentally, that, okay, whether it's making sense or not. And we have to relate it with the practical point of view that, yes, this makes sense to our profession as well. So that's how we have to relate it. And it's, trust me, it's purely practical. If you're going to take a read yourself, you will see this looks theoretical. But once you will understand each of those words that is mentioned there, that is written there, if you have a fundamental clarity on that, you will say that, yes, this makes sense. This makes sense that why it is written here. And that is where we have to get the concept clarity, because in the examination, there will be no direct question. There will be situational question asked in the examination. So you have to understand each word. You have to understand each terminology that has been used in the entire content. And that is where we will put more emphasis on. So let's coming back on the mandatory guidance, folks. We'll understand definition of internal auditing. The entire definition is important, and trust me, the entire definition is all about part 1 unit, entire part 1, because definition covers the different types of engagements that we do. It covers independence, objectivity in itself. It covers the different nature of engagements that we do. So when we understand the definition, we are going to understand it relating it to the entire part 1 rather. As I said, there are 10 core principles of internal auditing that we are going to go through. And then we have 4 types of standards. So the 4 types of standards are attribute standards, performance standards, interpretation standards, and implementation standards. We'll see the next slide. How does that work? And then we'll get into the GLIM content. And then, as I said, there are 4 types of code of ethics: integrity, objectivity, confidentiality, and competency. So that was on mandatory guidance, folks. Apart from this, we have recommended guidance. Under the recommended guidance, we have implementation guidance and supplemental guidance. Okay, so that's a very brief about what does IPPF cover. So can you all read it together? IPPF have two important elements. What are those? IPPF have two things. What are those? It contains
mandatory guidance and recommendation.
Recommended guidance.
Mandatory guidance we have
Core
Core
principles.
principles, definition of internal auditing standards,
code of ethics.
and under the recommended guidance we have.
implementation guidance and
Supplemental
supplemental
guidance.
guidance.
All right, so let's now throw some more light on the standards. Okay, folks. So as I said, there are 4 types of standards. Can you all read it together? What are the 4 types of standards? The 4 types of standards are attributes,
Performance,
interpretation,
implementation.
Let's hold ourselves and we'll spend 5 minutes on this slide, folks. This is very important to set up the tone for the entire CIA. Okay. So let's, and this is very, very important for us as professionals to know, right? So we all are probably a good experience. Some of us would have a significant amount of experience in our profession, and some of us would have just starting up our journey in the risk advice domain, or we would have been in midterms, whatever it is. All I'm trying to say is it's very important for us being an internal auditor to know that what are the different types of standards that the IA has kind of published that is important for internal auditors to kind of follow. So it's very important to understand them. So as I said, folks, these standards are published by Institute of Internal Auditors. It's by IIA. They have categorized that standards into 4 categories, which covers attribute, performance, interpretation, implementation. There are total 19 attribute standards. Now, again, you don't have to remember the number. It's just the sake of knowing that, okay, if anyone asks us in our professional journey, or anyone asks, okay, how many standards even I have published? So we should know that, yes, there are total 19 attribute standards. There are total 33 performance standards. And that's the reason I mentioned the count here. So there are total 19 attribute standards. Attribute standards starts with 1000 series. So every attribute standard is starting with, it's like 1001, 1010, 1020, or whatever it is. It starts with 1000 series. Okay. Performance standards, there are 33 performance standards, and it starts with 2000 series. Okay. So that's all the 2 number series that we follow in the standards. And how many total count is there? Total, how many attribute standards, folks? Total are how many
19.
attribute standards? Total 19. How many performance standards?
33.
Total 33 performance standards, right? So now let's understand what does these standards mean. Okay, so let's clear the fundamentals. And now this is again important because sometimes in the examination they can ask, okay, what does attribute standard mean? What does performance standard mean? What does interpretation standard mean? What does implementation standard mean? So attribute standard, what does it mean, folks? Attribute standards basically tells us that, okay, so let's try to split our internal audit function. How does the internal audit function works? Can anyone tell me how does the internal audit function works? Who all are involved in the internal audit function? Let's clear the fundamental concepts. Okay, okay. The company would have what? Let's cover the. Let's talk about little bit about the governance structure of the company. The governance structure of the company will have at the top would be whom? What would be whom? It will be the
Audit committee. Board of directors.
It will be the board of directors, right? It will be the board of directors at the top, which means that it will be the trust. It could be called as board of directors. It could be called as promoter. It could be called as trustees, right? It's basically the highest governing body, right? You can say that, right? And we'll understand that when we are going to cover more in detail. But after we have the board of directors, one line below the board of directors is what? Is
Management.
Is the management, right? So normally as part of the senior management, we'll have the company CEO, the CFO, and all of them, right? And yes, below them will all be the business function heads, respective line of business heads, and whatever it is for performing the one day in day out. Apart from it, there is one more function, like we have a procurement function, we have sales function, we have marketing function, we have procurement function, and so on and so forth. We also have one function which is called as internal audit activity function, right? It could be called as a GRC function. It could be called as internal audit function, whatever it is. There could be different terminologies being used in various companies. So as I said, there is an internal audit function that is there. Now, internal audit function head is normally called as the Chief Audit Executive. It's a CAE. Is that correct? Who is called as the head of the internal audit function? It is normally called as CAE, right? So it's the Chief Audit Executive, right? So just below the Chief Audit Executive, we have the different like team members, right? So we will have the senior internal auditors, we will have the staff auditors, we will have the managers, we will have the supervisors or whatever, SME experts, and so on and so forth. So that's a broad structure that how the organization works. I'm not getting into detail of management, folks. I'm just trying to put a perspective on why I'm talking what I'm talking about. So I'll come on that now. See, attribute standard basically tells us the responsibilities. It basically governs the responsibilities, attitudes, and actions of the organization, internal audit activity as a function, as well as the people who serve as internal auditors. Now, what does it mean? It means that it will tell that, okay, internal audit activity as an internal audit function or internal audit activity is responsible for this. The attitude that is expected out of the internal audit function is this. The actions that are expected out of the internal audit function is this. So basically, it's covering the internal audit activity or the internal audit function, and it is also telling the same thing to the individual internal auditors. So are you clear? What does it say? Can you all read it together now? Attribute standards basically, and I'll throw more light so that you can understand it more practically. But just read this out. Attribute standard basically governs the
responsibilities,
attitude,
So
and
only two voices, so we have 45 members.
the organization,
people who serve in internal audit.
So now what are the different attribute standards? Let's cover this and then we'll understand performance standards. So the total 19 attribute standards, folks, is basically listed on this slide. So this is, as I said, it starts with 1000 series, right? So we have 1000, 1010, 1200, 1300. So it's a 1000 series. Then we have performance standard, which starts with 2000 series. Okay. So now let's stick back on attribute standards. Into attribute standards. Now just read this out. What are the different attribute standards? These are total 90. And I'll tell you the beauty of these 19 attribute standards. All of these 19 attribute standards gets covered in only unit 1 and unit 2 of the CIA part 1. So are you getting it what I'm trying to say? Only the unit 1, unit 2, which we are going to cover, the first 2 units of the part 1, all 19 attribute standards gets covered in that. And that's the reason it is 55% weighted in the examination, folks. And I'm probably emphasizing it again and again, but that's very, very important when we are going to revise, when we are going to strategize our preparation. You have to really focus hard on the unit 1, unit 2, because it's 55% and all 19 attribute standard gets covered on only unit 1 and unit 2. So now coming back again, attribute standards. Let's read this out. So attribute standards, the first standard is purpose, authority, and responsibility. So what is the purpose of internal audit activity? What is the, who is giving the authority to the internal audit activity? What all authority the internal audit activity has? What internal audit activity or the internal auditors are responsible for. So that is what is the first standard that says. So it's basically saying what? It governs the responsibilities, attitudes and actions of the organization, internal audit activity, and people who serve as internal auditors. Then it also says that, okay, internal audit activity should be independent. It should be objective. Internal auditors should be objective. It should have organization independence. There should be direct interaction with the board. The CA should have roles. What CA should do in case the CA have roles beyond the internal auditing. When we are going to cover all of it, you will understand more in detail. But please understand at this point of time that these are more for internal audit activity as a function, and it is for the individual internal auditors. It governs the responsibilities, attitudes, and actions that are expected out of the internal audit activity and the individual internal auditors. Now, what are performance standards, folks? Performance standards will tell that, okay, internal auditors can do, these are the various nature of work that internal auditors can do. So nature of work as in like governance engagement, risk management engagement, control related engagement, all that nature of work gets covered under performance standards, okay? Then it also provides quality criteria for evaluating the internal audit performance. So performance standards includes all the different standards that we have normally applied in practical internal auditing. Let's say, how do we develop a risk-based internal audit plan? How do we do engagement planning? How do we define the scope? Whom do we communicate the results? How do we do sampling and all of that? So it basically covers the way the internal audit activity needs to be carried out, and it also gives the quality criteria whether all those were followed by the internal auditor or not, and then you can kind of assess whether the internal auditor has done the engagement planning or not. So are you all clear what I'm trying to say? if we just have a look on this performance standard, it's basically covers, okay, who managed the internal audit activity. It talks about the nature of work, GRC as I said. It covers the end-to-end, step-by-step, the way things we do in the practical word on internal auditing, that how do we do engagement planning, what should we cover in plan, what should be considered in planning. All of this gets covered in the part 2, folks, and that's the reason I'm not emphasizing. I'm just sharing a perspective that what is attitude and performance. Attitude standard will govern the responsibilities, attitudes, and actions. Performance standard will tell that, okay, this is the nature of work that we can do, and provides the quality criteria to evaluate the performance. Does that make sense? Attribute standards and performance standards, how do we differentiate between the two? Is that clear?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes?
Yes.
All right. So now coming on the third and fourth type of attribute standards, which is interpretation and implementation. Interpretation standards. So attribute standard, now these are very small standards, unlike what we have studied in chartered accountancy or any other professional course. These are not very long standards, folks. These are hardly a couple of lines that is mentioned, but we have to interpret and interpret those each terminologies that have been mentioned in that. So that is where the interpretation standards come in. It clarifies the terms and conditions that are mentioned in attribute and performance standards. So let's say the attribute standard says that the CA is the CA should have direct access to the board. I'm just taking an example. So what does it mean? Direct access to board. What does it mean? How do CAE will get the direct access to board? So that is basically cleared by the interpretation standard. So interpretation standards basically clarify for terms and conditions that are mentioned in attribute and performance standards. This is very important in the examination. Exam may ask you that, okay, which standard clarify the terms and conditions of other standards? Is it attribute, performance, interpretation, implementation? What will you answer? It will be
Interpretation.
Which standard clarify the terms and conditions, folks?
Interpretation standards.
Very good. So can I quickly hear the word yes from everyone? Are you all with me? I can hear only 4, 5.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Voices, Prakshit, Prabodh, last type of standard, which is implementation standard. Now, this is again very important. Implementation standard, basically the key the key wording that we need to remember standards, which is attribute and performance standard. Basically, implementation standards is nothing, folks. It will basically provides exact requirements that will be applicable to assurance and consulting services. So let's say, for example, if you have to do engagement planning, how do we exactly do that engagement planning? So that is basically given by implementation standard. Let's say if you have to do any specific audit, how do we do that? It is basically how do we implement it? It's basically provided by the implementation standards. So in the examination, again, there is a potential question that can be asked that which standard expand upon other category of standards? Is it attribute, performance, interpretation, implementation? The answer would be, what will be the answer? The answer would be
Implementation.
So my suggestion is please read this out once again, because this is very important. What is attribute standard? The key, can you all read this together? Attribute standards. You read it.
Govern the responsibilities, attitudes, and actions of the
Organization's internal audit
People who serve as internal auditors.
What is performance standard?
It governs
the
nature of
internal auditing and provide
evaluating the internal audit performance.
And interpretation standards are?
These are the clarifications
For terms and conditions in attribute and performance standards.
And implementation standards?
It expands upon the other standards attribute and performance.
For CIE part 1, folks, you have to just focus on attribute standards. When we are going to cover the part 2, it covers the performance standards. Okay. So in part 1, it is all about attribute standards only. We hardly read out 1 or 2 or 3 performance standards in the entire content, but otherwise in the entire part 1, we have to just focus on attributes. Okay. Any queries so far? Are you all clear so far? Are you all with me, folks? Can we move forward?
implementation implementation का एक बार फिर से बता दो, मतलब क्या वो कहना चाह रहा है उसमें?
Yeah, please call out your name whenever you are asking a question so that I know whom I'm speaking with and others also know who has asked the question. That was
Mithilesh this side.
Yeah. So basically, Mithilesh, what it's saying is, it says that So basically, implementation standards will tell the exact requirements. So let's say attribute standards will say that, okay, let's take an example here. So let's say attribute standard says that that direct interaction with the board. Okay, so it will say that direct interaction with the board, the CA should have a direct interaction with the board. So how does the direct interaction with the board can be there? Now, what does it mean? Direct interaction with the board, what does it mean? That will be clarified with the help of interpretation standard. But how do we implement that? How do we implement that in the company? That will be done by implementation standard. So the exact requirements and how do we achieve what is there in attribute and performance will be provided by the implementation standard. Does that make sense? It basically provides the requirements that is applicable to these the different engagements also that we do. Does that make sense? It expands upon these standards. Yeah. All right. So it's basically help us to kind of take the decision on how do we implement it. Now, in today's session, we are going to cover the two standards, folks. We are going to just cover two standards in the first unit, which covers 1000, which is purpose, authority, and responsibility. And we have 1010, which covers recognizing mandatory guidance in the internal charter. Both of them, purpose, authority, and responsibility, and recognizing mandatory guidance in the internal charter is part of our topic, internal audit charter. Okay, so that will be covered towards the end of the unit. But these are the two attribute standards we are going to cover in the unit 1. All the other 17 standards we are going to cover in unit 2. All right, so that's very brief about the different standards. Now let's start with going through the content. And we'll cover a couple of things when we are going to cover internal charter. We are going to take a look on how internal charter really looks like from a practical word point of view. And we'll try to cover a couple of things with various examples. Okay. So before we get into the content, are you all with me? Can we start the content, folks? We'll go through each of the word that is written in the claim. We'll try to understand with various examples, logics, fundamentals, and I'll be requesting a lot of you to read out the content together separately as well, so that the session is overall very participative. Yes?
Yes,
Can I hear once again?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, are you all with me? Yes, very good, very good.
Yes, sir.
All right. So as I said, see folks, it's right here, foundation of internal auditing. Claim is a more than sufficient content. Whatever practice, whatever MCQs that we're going to practice in the session is more than sufficient, but still you will have a lot more that you can do it as your practice session. But whatever content we are going to cover in the session series, that is more than sufficient. If I feel that there will be anything that is important from an overall perspective, I will be covering that through slides, but you don't have to cover anything from a content standpoint of view beyond what is covered in the session. All of it that we are going to cover in the session series is going to be more than sufficient. You don't have to look for any other content. We will clear our fundamental concepts. Once we are clear with our fundamental concepts, you understand the terminologies, you understand the wordings. It is just an English that is written in different content in a different way, but ultimately the same message gets passed on. Okay, so whatever we are covering in the session series is more than sufficient. No other content is required. So GLIM, and we are principally relying on GLIM, and it's trust me, it's completely fine. We can easily pass the examination with the GLIM content. All right, so as I said, foundation of internal auditing, folks, the 8 subunits that we've talked about in our opening slides. That's what we are going to cover. We have talked about 15% of the CIE Part 1 examination weightage, split it into basic and proficient. That's also we have kind of covered already. Now let's start with the first thing, which is applicable guidance, under which we are talking about IPPF. So the first thing that we are going to talk about is mission of internal audit. So what is the mission of internal audit, folks? What is the mission of internal audit? The mission of internal audit, and sometimes in the examination, there could be a direct question for this. Please, folks, let's not talk about the books and stuff. We'll read the content. We'll take up these questions towards the end of the session. Okay. Yeah. So please ignore these questions. Let's completely focus on the content. Hear me out. All of that, which is I'm going to say probably highlighted, would be probably covered somewhere on the presentation deck, things to remember deck. We'll revise it. We'll do a lot of it that will be covered directly in the session. So you all have to be right on the screen, hearing me loud and clear, with participating, covering, understanding the clarity. You all can reread the content, and with the help of presentation and the PDFs that even if you don't have today, you will still be able to locate. But we don't have to think that okay, we don't have the book or whatever because of any administrative issues. Today, here in the next couple of hours, we're just going to understand the concept. We'll understand the content. Okay. So is that okay? Is that okay, Meet? Is that okay for everyone? Yes?
Yes, Arpit.
Yes.
Yep. All right. Please focus on the content. Please, let's focus on this. Let's utilize the best of our time when we're spending it right here together, folks. So let's start again, once again, starting with mission of internal auditing. Now, this is very important. Sometimes in the examination, there's a direct question that may be asked that what is the mission of internal auditing? And there could be various examples to it. Yes, Pramod, please go ahead.
Small request, if you can enlarge the Word file. What happens is it's really useful when you do a revision, of a recording. So it really helps enlarging the Word file. Just the view.
The PDF you're saying?
The PDF, yeah, just the view.
I'm not sure, Pramod, if I can do that. I think there would be some copyright issues. I have to check.
No, just enlarge it. Enlarge it.
Oh, you're saying you enlarge it. Oh, sorry. I thought
you
to attach it on the LMS. Sorry. No, is it better now? Is it
better?
Yeah.
Because what happens
is extremely
sometimes...
sorry. I interpreted it wrong. Yeah, I thought you're saying attach it. I heard the word attach it.
Yeah, the only request, the only reason why I do this, because sometimes I know that I look it into from a mobile device whenever I'm revising the
recording. I understand.
Session.
Yes.
And this is very useful. Otherwise, it is very small.
Right. No, absolutely.
Thank you.
Is this better? Thank you for highlighting that. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think this is better.
Yeah, all right. So let's start once again, folks. Now coming on the mission of internal auditing. Mission of internal auditing, and as I said, that there could be a direct question sometimes asked in the examination that what is the mission of internal auditing, or what best describes the mission of internal auditing, and there would be multiple options to it. Okay, so you have to remember this, that mission of internal auditing, and this is again, you will probably understand that when you're going to read the definition of internal auditing as well. This is all important, and it gets addressed to a couple of important words. Let's read out this. It says mission of internal auditing is to enhance and protect the organization value by providing risk-based and objective assurance, advice, and insight. So maybe at this point of time, this looks like very theoretical, but when we are going to understand the terminology objective, when we are going to understand the terminology what is risk, when we are going to understand what the terminology advice and insights, we are going to understand it more better. But at this point of time, please remember that mission of auditing, we as employers, our mission is to enhance and protect organizational value. So organization value is based on the organization objectives. Organization value is based on the important things that the organization, the decisions that they take. So we basically provide assurance and consulting services to the management, and our mission is to enhance and protect the organization value by providing risk-based and objective assurance. So objective is basically unbiased, folks. Objective is basically not internal auditor not being in conflict of interest. So objective is unbiased assurance. So let's read this together. It says to enhance and protect organization value by providing risk-based and objective assurance, unbiased assurance, complete assurance, providing the right set of facts and numbers to the management, giving them the right assurance is all about giving them the actual facts and advice and insight. So basically, we have to remember that this is something that you need to remember, that as the mission of internal audit is to enhance and protect organization value by providing risk-based and objective assurance, advice, and insight. So can you all read this together? What is the mission of internal auditing? The mission of internal auditing is
to enhance and
protect organizational value by providing risk and objective assurance.
Advice and insight. Facilitating the achievement of
insight. All right. So then facilitating the achievement of the above mission that is mentioned is actually how the IPPF helps in. Okay, so if it's basically said that, okay, if we are following the IPPF framework, which includes the definition, standard code principles, mandatory guidance, as in all the mandatory guidance, and we are following the code of ethics, we are performing the work with due diligence and professional care, everything gets covered in the IPPF basically, folks. If you're able to do that, it basically helps us to facilitate and help us to achieve the above mission, which is by applying the right IPPF framework, we will be able to actually enhance and protect the organization value. Okay. Now coming on, the IPPF organizes the IAA authoritative guidance so that it is accessible and strengthen the IAA as a global standard setter. The IPPF contains mandatory and recommended guidance. So we have already covered this graph, folks. What does the IPPF covers? Now this is total. If you would like to have the entire IPPF framework at one place, so there's roughly about 25-30 pages IPPF that you can easily download from IA website. and that is separately. You can keep it separate. You can reread it. All the standards, attribute, performance standards are covered in the IPPF framework itself. That's hardly a total 25-30 pages document. And for the part 1, you can refer to the 10-15 pages which covers all the attribute standards. So you can choose to do that. Now coming on mandatory guidance, folks. Let's take this up. So it says adherence to the mandatory guidance is essential for the professional practice of internal auditing. The mandatory guidance consists of 4 elements. What are the 4 elements? The core principles, the definition, the code of ethics, and the standards. Now there are total 10 core principles. Okay, how many total principles are there? The total 10 principles are 10 core principles. Okay, all right. So 10 core principles. Do we need to learn it or do we need to understand it? We need to
Understand it.
Understand it. Okay. All right. So the core principles of internal auditing. Before getting into this, let's try to understand a couple of things more here, folks. So see, we'll understand definition of internal auditing. We'll understand core principles. We'll understand standards. We'll understand code of ethics. Now, one very, very important thing is that whatever is there in the standards and whatever is there in the code of ethics. Okay, it actually, if you're conforming to standards and code of ethics, we can say that we are complying to core principles as well as the definition of internal auditing. Why? The reason is the definition of internal auditing and the core principles are also embedded in standards and code of ethics. So let's say when we are reading code principles, lot of the core principles will be coming out of the code of ethics itself. Okay, and let me now share some light on that. So the 10 core principles covers demonstrates integrity, demonstrates competence in due professional care, is objective and free from undue influence, is independent, aligns with the strategies, objectives, and risk of the organization, is appropriately positioned and adequately resourced, demonstrates quality and continuous improvement, communicate effectively, provide risk-based assurance, is insightful, proactive, future focus, and promotes organization improvement. Folks, integrity is part of my code of ethics. So there are 4 code of ethics, right? So what are the 4 code of ethics? The 4 code of ethics are, can anyone tell what are the 4 code of ethics? We have covered
Integrity,
objectivity,
confidentiality,
and competence.
Competency, right? So integrity is covered in my code of ethics, right? So demonstrates integrity. So like core principles also says demonstrates integrity. It's somewhere there in my code of ethics as well. Demonstrates competence in due professional care. Again, integrity, objectivity, confidentiality, competency. So competency is also getting covered under my code of ethics, right? Then we have various standards where we cover due professional care as well. So that is again through standards and code of ethics, this gets covered. Objectivity, again, with the help of code of ethics as well as standards, this gets covered. So what we're seeing is core principles, the couple of things that are mentioned on the core principles are also covered in code of ethics and standards. So let's say the examination, if the examination says that do internal, in order to say that internal auditor is complying to the IPPF framework, can internal auditors say that, okay, they are complying to the IPPF framework if they're following the standards and code of ethics, or whether they have to say that, okay, no, they have to categorically say that, okay, no, they are following definition, core principles, standards, and code of ethics. What will be your answer? Your answer would be that we can say that we are complying to the IPPF framework if we are conforming to standards and code of ethics. Is that clear? Is that clear? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
I can hear only 1 or 2 years, folks. Are you all with me? There are 45
Yes,
plus
yes,
folks.
Yes,
Yeah?
sir. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Sundaram, Shrikant,
Yes, sir.
Rohit,
Yes.
Sumant, yeah, everyone. Venkatesh. All right.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So let's read this. Let's read all the core principles. This is again important. Can you all read this together? Read all the 10 core principles together. The core principles are the basis of internal audit effectiveness. Now there is one more important thing. The internal audit function is effective if all the principles are present and operating effectively, which means if all these 10 things are working together, if we are having integrity, if we are objective, we are doing our work with due professional care, but we are not future focused, we are not insightful, we are not proactive, we do not promote organization improvement. Can we say that we are an effective internal audit function?
No.
Can we say that?
No.
We have to have all the 10 principles. It says the internal audit function is effective if, can you all read together? Internal audit function is effective if
All principles are present
Principles are present and operating effectively.
operating effectively.
All right, so let's see together. The 10 core principles include, can you all read this together? Everyone, 45 voices, everyone together. What are the 10 core principles?
Demonstrates
Demonstrates
integrity,
Free from undue influence, so independent.
Aligned with the strategies,
Strategies, objectives, and risks of the organization. Appropriately positioned and adequately resourced. District quality and continuous improvement. Communicates, provides risk-based assurance. Proactive and focused. Organization improvement.
So now I'll share just a couple of pointers so that you just don't learn it and just understand it practically and relate it better. And of course, when you're going to get in detail, we'll reflect back on the core principles, and then you will get lot more confident that yes, you understand this. So when can we say that we demonstrate integrity, folks? When can we say that internal auditor is demonstrating integrity? So let's say we are working basically integrity helps us to build the trust. Okay, so one key word that comes with integrity is it helps us to build the trust. Now, how does it happen? We can say that, okay, we can demonstrate integrity if we are working with honesty. Okay, we are not becoming party to any illegal act that is happening in the company. So that's a second important point that we need to remember from an integrity standpoint of view. The third important point from demonstrating integrity is that we should not be discreditable to the profession. So which means that we should not pass on discreditable comments for the organization. We should not lie. We should not say that, okay, we are a certified employer if we are not really that. So we have to demonstrate integrity in that way. Okay, so does that give you a perspective when it says demonstrate integrity? Integrity helps us in, what does it help us in? It helps us in building the
trust.
It helps us in building the trust. And when can we say that we are working with integrity? If we are being honest, if you are not becoming party to an illegal act, and if we are not passing the discreditable comments, we should not be passing the discreditable comments to the or adding any discreditable act to the profession. Okay, so that's how we demonstrate integrity. Now, demonstrates competence. We all understand the word competence, right? So we have to be competitive, right? We have to be competitive. We have to have the adequate competency on the work that we are doing. And we are going to understand competency much at length. But at this point of time, just understand that whatever work that we pick, we should be competent to kind of deliver it. So when so one aspect of competency is that, okay, tell me, can every one of us be equally competent? Yes or no?
No.
Can everyone, every person in the internal team be equally competent?
No.
So competency is seen more from a team perspective, right? So it's overall from a team perspective that internal audit activity should demonstrate competence, and we should be picking those works which we will be able to deliver. We should not be picking those work which we are not able to deliver or where we will not be able to add value. So let's say if a person doesn't have any idea on warehouse audit, and let's say the management is saying that you go and do the warehouse audit, and he has zero experience in it, and neither any of the team members have, neither any supervisor have. In that case, the person should say, no, I will need adequate trainings. We need a subject matter expert. We can hire an external expert for that to do that audit rather than themselves going in, right? But let's say there is an audit that happens 6 months down the line. And let's say before the audit that happens, the person visits the warehouse, understand the process, and now they want to go do it, then the person can go do it. Okay, so that's how we have to see demonstrates competence. So demonstrates competence is all about learning. Now, similarly, due professional care, we should perform the work with due professional care. Okay, we should not perform the work with fatigue. We should be careful enough when we are performing our duties. Now, the third core principle is objective. As I said, objective is unbiased, and it should not be having a conflict of interest. It should be objective. It should be free from undue influence. And then it's again very important, folks. Can we do any work that doesn't align to the strategies, objectives, or risk of the organization? Or it always says that internal audit objective should also be aligned to the objective of
Business.
Business, right? Yes. So our internal audit objective should also be aligning with the strategies, objectives, and risk of the organization. Now, this is again very important. Internal audit activity should be appropriately positioned and adequately resourced. What does appropriately position means? Can anyone tell? What does appropriately position means? Appropriately position. What did we understood here? We have read this, right?
The CAE should be part of the senior management.
Authority.
Okay.
The reporting line.
Should be able to mitigate the right risk.
Yeah, because go ahead.
Yeah, hi Arpit. I think appropriately positioned here means that the auditing department should be appropriately positioned in the organization.
Yes.
Where it should be the reporting hierarchy should be properly assigned, where they are reporting to the CAE, and the CAE should be directly reporting to the board of directors, having a direct approach towards them. That is what is it?
Absolutely, very good, because on spot. So folks will understand when we are going to cover more in detail. Appropriately position is very, very important terminology. What Vikas have said is absolutely correct. So basically, we can say the internal audit activity is appropriately positioned when the CAE have direct access to the board. What does it mean? It means that the CAE have direct access to the board. And how does the CAE achieve that? How do we achieve it? So normally you will see that the CAE in any company will have a dual reporting relationship. The dual reporting relationship has a functional reporting to the board and administrative reporting to the senior management, which is the CEO of the company. It's always said that, okay, functionally, the CA should report to the CEO of the company, which is the senior management. Sorry, administratively, which is for the day-to-day activities, the CA should report to the senior management of the company, which is the CEO, and functionally to the board. Is that clear?
Yes.
Can I hear all from you? What does appropriately position means? Appropriately position internal audit activities set as when the CAE has
Direct access to the board.
Direct
access to the board. How the CAE will have direct access to the board? By having a
functional
dual reporting relationship.
Dual reporting.
What does dual reporting has? Dual has two types of reporting relationship, which is functional and administrative. Functional is to the board. Functional reporting relationship is to the
board.
And administrative reporting.
Senior
administrative
management.
is
Senior management.
basic things, right?
Senior management,
Senior
generally
management. And senior management is the
CEO or CFO.
CEO of the company, right? So that's just the most preferred reporting relationship that should be seen in the companies. That is always encouraged by the IAA, and that's how we see it. Okay, and that should be there actually. That is how it should work. Okay. Now the next leg of it, it says that the internal audit activity should be adequately resourced, folks. Now this is again very important to achieve the effectiveness in the internal audit function. It should have adequate resources. What does adequate resource mean? Does it only mean the count, or it also includes the competency? Folks, if you're not speaking, keep yourself on mute, please. Adequately resource, what does it mean? It means it should be, one is the count of resources, that we should have sufficient number of resources.
Yeah.
The second is it should have the right set of competency as well, right? Right. So that's how we said it should be adequately resourced. And now again, resources is not only limited to people, folks. And we are going to understand more detail. We'll understand that it's also talk about infrastructure. It also talks about the tools and technologies. Let's say if you have to perform any audit, then we should be adequately resourced through data analytics tool, by the right set of people who have the right skill set. Let's say if you're doing any telecom industry, then someone from a telecom industry, experienced telecom sector would be really helpful. So some SME could really help in that case. So we should have a versatile experience in the team. It could be a group of engineers. It could be a group of chartered accountants, CIAs, even marketing specialists and stuff like that, data analyst specialists and so specialists. But these should not be part of my client team. Okay, so we can't hire anyone from the client team. In that case, it will impair the objectivity, folks. Okay, so we should be adequately resourced. That's what I'm trying to say. And of course, it should demonstrate quality and continuous improvement. So again, whatever we are doing, we should demonstrate quality in whatever we are doing, and it should be continuously improved. And for this, we will cover quality assurance and improvement program, which is again very, very important, which we cover in the unit 2. We should have effective communication skill set. We should provide risk-based assurance. We should be insightful. We should be proactive, folks, and we should be future-focused. We should not only talk about past. Okay, so it's always said that okay, internal auditors will always talk about the past. They will come up and say that okay, this is what has happened wrong in the past. But please understand that what we have to do as an internal auditor, we are expected to be insightful. We should be proactive and we should be future focused. We should highlight what are the potential risks that may come even in the decision making of the company. We should be future focused. We should highlight those risks that could impact into the organization from a future standpoint as well. So we should be insightful, proactive, and future focused, and we should promote organizational improvement. Is that clear now, folks? Are you all clear with the core principles, the 10 core principles?
Yes.
Just more than just reading it, are you clear on the fundamental terminologies that have been mentioned?
Yes.
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 All right. So great. So with that, we have covered core principles. The first one, have to learn it. But as I said, the definition of internal auditing is all about the part one. Okay. So let's try to understand this. The definition of internal auditing is a concise statement of the role of internal audit activity in the organization. What is the definition? It says internal audit activity is an independent, objective, assurance and consulting activity designed to add value and improve an organization operations. It helps an organization accomplish its objectives by bringing a systematic, disciplined approach to evaluate and improve the effectiveness of risk management, control, and governance process. I would request you to read this one once together, and then I will throw some more light on the definition of internal auditing before we move ahead. Can you all read this together, the definition of internal auditing? Everyone together, folks.
Internal auditing is an independent, objective, assurance activity designed to add value to an organizational operation. Helps an organization accomplish objectives, bringing an evaluate effectiveness of management, control, and governance process.
All right. So let's try to understand some of the key words, and let's try to understand how the exam is also. The examination, the way folks, the way examination works, it will give you very close by questions, close by answers. Okay, so it will give you a question, it will have very close by answers. So there's very important aspect that we need to learn and understand that which answer is correct. Okay, so let's read this out. It says internal auditing is what? It's an independent. The first word is independent. So we have to be the internal audit activity has to be independent in itself. It should be objective. What is objective? As I said, objective is unbiased and it should not have any conflict of
interest.
Right? Conflict of interest. So internal auditing should be independent. It should be objective. And then there are two types of engagements that we do. Normally, our entire activity is categorized into two broader categories nowadays. As per the IA definition, it is categorized into two broader categories. One is assurance services, and the second is consulting services. And that is something that we need to understand, folks. What is assurance? What is consulting also? All right. So the two types of engagements that we do, the two nature of services, as in the two types of engagements, the two types of activities that we do are, what are those activities? Type of
assurance and consulting activities.
Assurance and consulting.
All right. Now, very, very important is internal auditing is basically designed to add value. So we as internal auditors, the most important thing is we should add value, folks. So the key word here is adding value, So let's say in the examination, if the examiner is going to ask you that, okay, what is the most important role of internal auditor? Is it adding value to whatever, adding value and improve organizational operations? Is it giving assurance report, informing to the management that there is a potential concern in the organization, or giving a future perspective? What I'm trying to say now, these are all good options. Is that correct? All of this, we should give assurance. We should provide consulting services. We should give. We should be future prospective, right? But what is the most important in this? What best described as the internal auditor function? The best
Add value.
add value. So yes, to add value. So in that case, the key word is add value. Okay. So whenever in the examination it says about the internal auditor responsibility, it talks about internal auditor. Any key specific asks from internal auditors, it's more about adding value to organization. Okay, so add value is the key word, and that's, we have to remember it. Okay, so And this is when we will practice a lot of MCQs. We'll try to relate it with various examples also, what I'm trying to say. But at this point of time, are you clear? What is the key word? In the definition of internal auditing, we are talking about independence. Internal audit activity should be independent. It should be objective. We're providing two types of activities or two types of services, which is assurance and consulting, which is designed to add value and improve organization operations. How do we achieve it? We achieve it by bringing a systemic discipline approach to evaluate and improve the effectiveness of the GRC process, which is governance, risk management, and control. So why I was saying the part one is all about the definition. See, folks, we are talking about the first one, which is foundation of auditing. The next unit is all about independence, objectivity, due professional care, quality assurance and improvement program and all. After that, we have the unit 3 to unit 6 is all about governance, risk management, and control process. And the last unit is fraud. So that's why the entire definition is actually the entire CIA part one. Does it make sense now?
Yes, sir.
Yes?
Yes.
All right, very good.
Yes.
So with that, we have covered two important aspects so far, core principles and the definition of internal auditing, folks. Moving on now to the next part. The code of ethics will cover later, which is quite in detail, the standards now. So the standards known formally as the International Standard for the Professional Practice of Internal Auditing. So like IPPF framework, which is International Professional Practice Framework, the standards are known as International Standards for the Professional Practice of Internal Auditing. Can you all read that together? Standards are also known as, these are formally known as International
Standard for Professional Practice of Internal Auditing.
All right. The standards serve the four purposes that are described below. Now, this is what are the four purposes of standards? It says guide adherence with the mandatory elements of the IPPF framework. What is guide adherence to the mandatory elements? You all know mandatory elements now. Is that correct? What are you know mandatory elements of the IPPF framework? Yes or no? Yes.
Yes.
The mandatory guidance. The four things. Yes. It provides a framework for performing and promoting a broad range of value-added internal audit services. It establishes the basis of evaluation of internal audit performance, and it fosters improved organization, process, and operations. It's just a read, folks. You don't have to learn it. Just take a quick read on this. Now, moving on the different types of standards, and this is something that we have broadly understood. So let's leverage that our understanding that we've shared on the presentation slides. The standards are vital to the practice of internal auditing, but CIA candidates need not memorize them. As I said, we don't have to remember the numbers also. What does 1000 standard is? What is 1010? We don't have to remember the series, folks. We don't have to learn or memorize them. We have to just understand them. It's vital to the practice of internal auditing, but CIA candidates do not memorize them. How the principles they establish thoroughly understood and appropriately applied. I'll take a quick pause here. Are you all clear so far what we have studied? Are you clear on the core principles? Are you clear on the definition? Are you clear on broadly on what is IPPF all about? Yes, or no?
Yes.
Am I going too fast? Is it going fine? The speed is fine. Anyone, folks, are you all able to understand what we have covered? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So attribute standards. So let's try and cover attribute standards now. As I said, attribute standard, what is the number series? The number series is, it's numbered in the right. Now let's cover this. Can you all read this together? We have already covered this. Attribute standard number in the thousands. It governs the
responsibilities, attitudes, and actions of the organization's audit activity who serve as
right. So it will tell that, okay, what is the responsibility, attitude, and actions of the internal audit activity function, and the people who serve as internal auditors. This is nothing. These are us who are the individual internal auditors, right? Folks, just for your better understanding, they will appear in the boxes with green highlighting, which is like, this is just an example. So now when we are going to cover each one of these attribute standards, we don't have to like cover this as in, these are just examples, okay? So it doesn't mean that you have to learn it. You have to just understand that, okay, an attribute standard, this is just one type of attribute standard, while we have taken variety of others. We have covered through the presentation that what are the different attribute standards, all those 19 in series. Similarly, when we are going to read performance standards, so again, this is just one example of performance standard. You don't have to learn it. When we are going to cover the part 2, it covers one more detail. It covers much more detail, even in the GRC piece. When we're going to read governance, risk management, and control, we're going to cover some of these there also in the part one itself when we move to unit 3 to unit 6. So this is just one example. However, ultimately we have to just understand the context here, that what does attribute standard means, what is performance standard, what is interpretation standards, which we have already covered. So I will need a volunteer in who would like to just quickly cover each one by one, just the headings, and then we'll just take one example on these standards and then we move forward. So can I have 3 volunteers who would like to read attribute standard, performance standards, and implementation standards, just the headings here, as in just the first paragraphs here? Can I have anyone?
Nupur, myself.
Yeah, Nupur, please go ahead. Just be a little loud. Yeah.
All right. Is it better now?
Yes, much better. Please go ahead.
Okay. Attribute standards, numbered in the thousands, govern the responsibilities, attitudes, and functions of the organization's internal audit activity and the people who serve as internal auditors. They appear in boxes with green highlighted, example below, throughout this text. Do I need to read this?
Yes. Go, just read out the standard and I will share some more.
Yes. Attribute standard 1000. Purpose, authority, and responsibility. The purpose, authority, and responsibility of the internal audit activity must be defined in an internal audit charter, consistent with the mission of internal audit and mandatory elements of international professional practices framework, the core principles for the professional practice of internal auditing, the code of ethics, the standards, and the definition of internal auditing. The chief audit executive must periodically review the internal audit charter and present it to senior management and the board for approval.
All right, thank you, Nupur. So let's understand this with an example, folks. So basically, this is just one example, and when we are going to cover internal charter, we are going to cover much more in detail. This is repetitive at 3 times in the entire content. Okay, by the way, in the unit 1 itself. So, but this is very, very important. Okay, if I have to ask you very precisely, and let's relate it a little practical and make this session a little more practical. The one document, let's say you, and practically speaking, you would have seen this case many times coming in your professional careers. A lot of times the people will say that, okay, we will not share this information. This is very confidential. And who have given you authority? Has anyone faced this question many times in your professional career, being internal auditor?
Yes.
Anyone who
Yes.
So you would have faced not many times that, okay, yes, who has given you authority? Is that correct? We will not share this information. This is very confidential. I think this would be a repetitive question in variety of engagements. Let's be payroll audit, let's see pricing related aspects, recipe related aspects that is not a lot of times seen very confidential in organization. So one answer to that is the internal audit charter. Okay, so who has given the authority? What proves that? Okay, what is the document that you can show to the organization that, okay, basis this documentation, I'm asking you this information.
Internal audit.
That is nothing.
Internal audit charter.
Audit charter of the company. Yes, is that clear? Is that clear, folks? One, that document is charter, who approved by the board. Is that clear? Is that clear? Yes.
Yes.
All right. So now let's read this out. Purpose. So cover this at length also more in detail when we cover the internal audit charter. But since it's mentioned here, let's try to leverage on what is here. So folks, the internal audit charter basically covers what is the purpose of internal audit. And purpose is nothing. Purpose is, what is the purpose? If I have to ask you what is the purpose of internal audit, it is what it will be again about providing an independent, objective assurance and consulting services. It's going back to the definition of internal auditing, right? So that's the purpose of internal auditing. Authority is important. Authority is very important. When you're going to read the internal audit charter, basically the internal audit charter provides us a complete authority to unrestricted access to property, to documents, to the data points that are there in the company, so that we can perform our work without any scope limitation, without any concerns, with adequate information. So that's basically the authority. The authority is provided by the internal charter to provide us unrestricted access. Okay, and then what are responsible for? Again, we are responsible by providing them the insights. Being proactive helps the organization accomplish its objectives, right? So that's the purpose, authority, and responsibility. Now, what does attribute standard 1000 says? It says this purpose, authority, and responsibility. Whatever I've explained you, the purpose, authority, and responsibility of the internal audit activity must be formally defined in the internal charter. Now, are you able to understand what I'm trying to say? The purpose that I mentioned, the authority of having unrestricted access, and the responsibility of the internal audit activity, it should be clearly formally defined in what? It should be defined in the
Internal Audit Charter.
Okay. Am I audible, folks? Prakshit is saying that.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
All right. So then, so this is clear. The purpose, authority, and responsibility of the internal activity must be formally defined in the internal charter. It should be consistent with the mission of internal auditing. So we are clear with the mission of internal auditing and the mandatory elements of IPPF. So again, what are the mandatory elements? We are all clear with the four mandatory elements, right? The CA must periodically review the internal charter and present it to the senior management and the board for approval. So that's the attribute standard. It says that we should have an internal charter in place. We should have the purpose, authority, and responsibility. The internal charter should clearly mention that that internal audit activity as a function should comply to IPPF framework and the mandatory elements of the IPPF framework, and it should be revisited, reviewed at a frequent periodicity, and it should be approved by the board. So that's what the attribute standard 1000 says. Okay, so it's basically telling what? It's telling the responsibility, attitudes, and actions of the organization, internal audit activity. It's just that it is just one aspect of it. There are many more such attribute standards. Okay. Now coming on performance standards, again, can I have a volunteer who would like to read performance standard with an example? Yes, anyone?
Arpit, can I ask a question on the previous one?
Yes, please go ahead, Rajesh.
Why should the internal audit charter have to be approved by the senior management? It should be approved by the board, but it should be presented to the senior management.
Yes, it should be approved by the board. It should be approved by the board, and yes, if it is the final approval resides with the board. Senior management may give some suggestions, may give some may request for changes, but you're absolutely right. If the examiner is going to ask you that who will have to approve the final charter, the responsibility of approving the final charter resides with the board. That's correct.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So coming on performance standard. So performance standard, can I have a volunteer who would like to read this?
Hi, this is Rohit here.
Yeah, Rohit, please go ahead.
Yeah. Performance standard 2120 risk management.
No, just read out this heading. Start from here.
Performance standards numbered in the 2000s govern the nature of internal auditing and provides, can you just remove the cursor? Provides quality criteria for evaluating the internal audit function's performance. Performance standards also appear in boxes with green highlighting example below. Performance standard 2120 risk management. The internal audit activity must evaluate the effectiveness and contribute to the improvement of risk management processes.
Right. Thank you, Rohit. So as I said, folks, performance standards, it will cover the nature of internal auditing and provides the quality criteria. So it will tell what are the different types of engagements that we do. So risk management is one part of it. It will also provide us the quality criteria for evaluating the internal audit functions performance. So right, like we discussed whether the engagement planning was done or not, whether the sampling was done or not, whether the communication of results was done to the right people or not. Let's say there is a follow-up was done or not properly. So all that is part of my performance standard. These are different things that gets covered in performance standard. So it also gives the quality criteria to evaluate the internal audit functions performance around that. Performance standards also appear in boxes. We have covered this. This is just one more example on performance standard 2120. It says risk management, the internal audit activity must evaluate the effectiveness and contribute to the improvement of risk management process. And now this is again very important, folks. When we move forward, we'll understand what is the role of internal audit activity in risk management, what is the role of board in the risk management, what is the role of senior management in the risk management, but that is something that is much later. We'll cover at that point of time. But at this point of time, just remember the internal audit activity must evaluate the effectiveness. The key word is evaluate here. The internal audit activity must evaluate the effectiveness and contribute to the improvement of risk management process. Finally, interpretation standards. Let's quickly cover this. Interpretation standards are provided by the IIA to clarify the. Can you read together? Interpretation standards are provided to clarify.
To clarify terms
and
and
concepts
with the attribute of performance
standards.
So this is more in the blue boxes. Now this is again interpretation standard. So as I said, see just one example here. It was just talking about internal audit charter, right? So attribute standards. So there's a terminology which is mentioned internal audit charter. Now interpretation standard will help us to give more clarity. It will say the internal audit charter is a formal document, because so far we don't know what is internal audit charter, right? It just says that okay, that the purpose, authority, and responsibility should be there in the internal audit charter. What is internal audit charter? So this is what is written in interpretation standards. It gives us the clarify. It gives the clarity on the terms and concepts that is mentioned on the attribute of performance standards. It says that the internal audit charter is a formal document that defines the internal audit activity, purpose, authority, and responsibility. The internal audit charter establishes the internal audit activity position within the organization, including the nature of the chief audit executive, functional reporting relationship with the board, authorize access to the records, personal and physical properties that is on the authority side of it, relevant to the performance of engagements, and define the scope of the internal audit activities. What are the variety of engagements that we can do, assurance, consulting, and all. And final approval of the internal charter resides with the board. So this is how it gets clarified, right? So Rajesh, as you asked, right? So final approval of the internal charter resides with the board, right? Is that clear now?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, great. So now coming on implementation standard, again, implementation standard expand upon the individual attribute of performance standard by providing the requirements applicable to the assurance and consulting services. This is more on gray boxes. It says the internal audit activity must be free from interference in determining the scope of internal auditing, performing work, and communicating results. The CAE executive must disclose such interference to the board and discuss the implication. So basically, I'll just try to give little clarity. So let's say here it is talking about implementation standard. This is 1110, folks. It is 1110. So 1110 is basically what? It talks about organization independence. So when we are going to cover next unit, we'll understand that more in length. It just try to understand at this point of time that okay, internal audit activity should be organization, should be independent. You can say internal audit activity should be independent. Now implementation standard will say that okay, how do we achieve that? So it will say internal audit activity can achieve that by having must be free from interference in determining the scope of internal auditing, performing work, communicating results. The CAE must disclose such interference to the board and discuss the implication. So let's say if there is any independence issue that comes, how do we, what is the action it needs to be taken? It is given by the implementation standard. Is that clear now? Does that make sense? Are you clear now? Interpretation standard will clarify what is the terminology that is mentioned in that, like the term, the concepts. Implementation standard will tell what exactly needs to be done. Is that clear? Yes, no?
Yes.
Yes? All right. Now, this is again important. This is something that we have covered. It says the core principles and the definition of internal auditing are encompassed in the Code of Ethics and Standard. Thus, conformance with code and the standard demonstrates conformance with all mandatory elements of IPPF framework. Did we cover this? Yes or no? Yes?
Yes, sir, we had covered this.
This is again very, very important, folks. This is very, very important from examination point of view. Can you all read it together? The core principles. Can you all read this together? This this paragraph.
The core principle and the definition of internal audit standards. Thus, conformance demonstrates all mandatory elements of the IPPF.
All right, very good, very good. So I think we are now clear with what we have covered, right? So now, very quickly, folks, it's also talk about recommended guidance. So the pronouncement that constitute recommended guidance have been developed by the IA through a formal approval process. They describe practices for effective implementation of the core principles, definition, code of ethics, and the standards. The two recommended elements of the IPPF framework, as in what is included in recommended guidance, it's implementation guidance and supplementation guidance. Folks, implementation guidance is different from implementation standard. Okay, implementation standard again, it just expands upon the category of expands and brief you up a little bit more in detail. But implementation guidance again is a detailed note which covers everything. So in fact, there is an implementation guidance on the entire IPPF framework. So if you want to choose to read it in detail, even you can do that. But all that we cover in the session, it's given a little bit at more clarity on that. So you can choose to read it. But yes, there is a document which is implementation guidance. Similarly, supplementation guidance. These are nothing. These are the position papers, the practice guides that are published by IIA. let's say if you want to talk about anything very specific to any type of nature of engagement, then solve these implementation guidance and supplement. So implementation guidance is more on the IPPF. Supplementation guidance is more on the practice guides that we want to kind of do. Let's say if we want to do engagement planning. So how actually we want to do it, we can refer to the engagement planning practice guides for that. So that's the supplementation guidance. Is that clear? From examination point of view, this is not important. I'm just sharing the perspective on the overall IPPF. Yes, is that clear, everyone, what we have covered so far? So with that, we have kind of covered the first aspect of, so far we have covered the mission, we have covered what does IPPF contains, we have covered what are the 4 things included in the mandatory guidance, we have covered the definition, we have covered the core principles, and we have covered the standards of auditing. Is that clear? These aspects, is that clear? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So purpose, authority, and responsibility of the internal audit activity. Now, this is again very, very important, folks, and this is something that we need to really understand well. So purpose, as I said, purpose is all about the definition. Okay, the purpose is basically the definition of internal auditing. So can I have a volunteer who would like to read just the purpose? It is nothing. It's a definition. Can anyone have take a quick read on this?
Yes.
Kapil, go ahead.
Yeah. As defined in IIA glossary, the purpose of internal audit activity is to provide independent, objective assurance and consulting services designed to add value and improve an organization operation. The internal audit activity helps an organization accomplish its objectives by bringing a systematic, disciplined approach to evaluate and improve the effectiveness of governance, risk management, and control processes.
Perfect, perfect. So that's exactly the definition that we'll talk about now. Now, very, very important, folks, is from the examination point of view is what is assurance services and what is consulting services. So let's understand that. Anyone who would like to share some thought on assurance, what is assurance and what is consulting? Anyone? What are assurance services? What are consulting services? Yeah, Vikas, please go ahead. So can I have someone, because just hold on, can I have someone else who have not participated? Deepak, you want to go? Chakshu, you want to go? Bhumika, you want to go ahead? Anyone who have not spoken so far? Yeah. Richard, there are 2 Richard Devedi, Ritu. Are you all with us? Can I quickly hear the word yes? Because this is very, very important from examination point of view, folks. Are you all with me? Yes, are you all with us? Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. So Alex, you want to go about this? What is assurance? What is consulting? I want to hear new voices, more participating folks. Anyone?
Sure.
Yeah, Alex. Yeah, please go ahead.
So I mean, in a nutshell, assurance is basically which provides the opinion and call out any kind of discrepancy within the department. And consultancy basically is kind of advisory in nature, which only 2 stakeholders involved.
Absolutely. Very good, Alex. So folks, very, very important. As the terminology itself says, it's all about assurance is all about expressing the opinion, right? So we are giving an objective assurance in our services. So we are expressing our opinion. We are evaluating how things are working, and we are then giving an assurance to the management, to the users of our work, right? So there could be various users for our work, but that's absolutely on spot. Assurance is all about expressing opinion. It's about evaluating. It's about giving it's like giving one kind of assurance to the management, to the users of our work. All right. So as Alex said, absolutely consulting is more advisory in nature. It's more facilitative in nature. It's more like you're giving awareness trainings to the people. So that's all about consulting services. Now, very, very important is between assurance and consulting, there are other few differences, folks. One is that we need to understand how many parties are involved in assurance and how many parties are involved in consulting services. So normally, as part of assurance services, there are 3 parties involved. One is the auditee, the process owners. The second is the auditor, and the third is the user. So in assurance engagements, how many parties are there? Can you all say that? How many parties are there in assurance engagement? We have
3 parties.
3 parties. Who are these parties? The 3 parties are
Auditee,
and the users.
So auditee is the process owners, right? So the people whose audit we are performing. Auditors are of course us and our team members. And the third one is users. Now, as I said, users could be there could be various users, right? So the external auditors can be the users. It could be the board, the senior management could be the users. Audit as in external regulators could be our users, right? So even let's say there could be external agencies like even bank or anyone could be the users of employee reports. Sometimes even investors could be external users of the users. So what we are saying is we are saying that there are three parties involved in an assurance engagement. It's the auditee, it's auditor, it's the user. Are you clear with that? Who are the users? Yes, Pramod, please go ahead.
My question is, can the auditee be also a user in this case?
Yeah, so yes, in a way, because if you see, auditee is also using the recommendations that we kind of submit in as part of our engagements, right? So auditee is also in one way user of it. They kind of use that internal audit reports to share among the teams that what are the areas of improvement. But precisely speaking, since we have a separate responsibility of auditee here, we are more using users from a different perspective, that it's more the board, external regulators. But yes, auditee will be the user of this of our work as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, but yes, that's about assurance. Now there are two parties in consulting. It's the client and it's basically the consultant, right? So as an auditor, we are the consultant in consulting engagements, and then we have client in that who are basically the users of the consulting services in a way. So two things that we have learned so far, we are going to cover in 4 different aspects. So we have talked about assurance is all about expressing opinion, evaluating, giving an assurance to the users, as I said, to the board mostly, and then we are talking about the different parties involved in it. Similarly, we have talked about consulting being advisory nature, and then what are the parties involved. Other than that, there are 2 important aspects of assurance and consulting services. Who determines the scope in assurance engagement? Who determines the scope in the assurance engagement, folks? This is something that you need to remember, that the scope of the assurance engagement is determined by the internal auditor. Is that clear? The scope of the assurance services engagement is determined by who? It's determined by the internal auditor. All right. The scope of the consulting engagement is basically under the concurrence of it's more to support the engagement plan. So it's more like in concurrence with the engagement plan, that okay, this is what we should review. All right. Rather than review, this is where they need support and advice. So that's how we agree on the scope. So that's again very important point of difference that you need to remember from examination point of view, that the scope in the assurance engagement is determined by the internal auditor and not the client, and the scope of the consulting engagement is determined in concurrence with the client. The last difference between assurance and consulting is more on the nature of the engagements. So engagements like financial audits, the engagements like performance audit, the engagements like due diligence, engagements like security assessment, all of these are different examples of assurance engagement. Examples like facilitation of a workshop, awareness training on the risk side, consulting on various areas, advisory. These are all nature of consulting engagements, right? So that's how we have to see the difference between assurance and consulting. Is that clear? Assurance and consulting?
Yes.
Broadly, are we clear? All right. So I'll throw a little bit more light on this. There's one more terminology that we'll be covering through the presentation slide, that is called blended engagements. Okay. But before getting into that, can I quickly hear the word yes from everyone? We have 40 folks. I need more and more voices. Blended engagements is very, very important from examination point of view. So can I hear yes from everyone before I share the thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Very good. So see, in the definition of internal auditing, we have talked about assurance engagement. We have talked about consulting engagement. We are clear with what is assurance. We are clear with what is consulting. Now, what is blended engagements? Blended engagements is nothing, folks. Blended engagements is combination of both. Okay, so it says that okay, assurance and consulting doesn't work in exclusivity. Okay, it's more. Sometimes you will see that okay, when we are doing assurance engagement, we are giving some consulting to it, and sometimes when we are doing consulting services, we may end up providing assurance or something. Okay, so what we are trying to say is that we can have engagements in nature of blended engagements, And normally you will also see, if you relate it practically, that okay, we are giving assurance, but eventually something that comes output of that is a consulting role, and sometimes you are taking a consulting role, and the output that comes up is an assurance role eventually, or there could be an initial assurance engagement coming out of it. Let's take an example. Let's say for us, let's say the organization have requested us to help them to let's say have a quick design level assessment or design level walkthroughs of the processes, and help them to document it in a form of SOPs. I'm taking just one example out of it. Let's say during our SOP discussions that we're trying to kind of help the organization to document in the right set of tone, we have identified that there are certain gaps. So what is happening, that is more of a nature of a consulting engagement, because in SOP designing, we are not doing any assurance activity, right? We're just drafting what is the as-is process of the company. Now, what we are doing is, while we are drafting it, we have come across certain areas, and we have noted that, okay, there are potential significant issues that could have happened in these areas because of lack of controls on those activities. So we have went back to the management and said that, okay, while we have done the process walkthroughs and we have documented the SOPs, there are these 10 areas which we feel that this doesn't have any control, or let's say these are not working in the right way, or in the appropriate manner. Now, what it may happen that the management may ask that, okay, why don't you go back and see in the last 1 year whether there has been a problem actually in it or not? When you're saying that this control was missing, or this was an open-ended issue, or there's a design level gap. So what is happening is the management may ask that, okay, you go and give us assurance. So with the help of consulting engagement, what we are ending up, we are doing the assurance engagement. Does that make sense? Yes or no? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes.
So after that, let's take another example on a reverse side of it. Let's say we are doing an assurance engagement, and we kind of identify that, okay, these are the 10 observations or key findings, and these are our recommendations, right? So when we give recommendation, the organization may say that, okay, one is that you're giving recommendation. Why don't you come and help us and consult to kind of help us, not you come and implement, but you guide us better, you advise us better to implement these things, what you're saying, so that we can actually have the improvements or recommendations getting implemented, right? So that is what we are doing in assurance engagement, and we are getting into a consulting role. So that's basically blended engagements. Does that make sense, folks? Blended engagements is the combination of assurance and consulting. Yeah, Pramod, please go ahead.
So I'll just like to cite one example from my previous organization, if that's okay. I can take a minute to. Is that okay?
Yeah, please go ahead. Please go ahead, Pramod.
So we had a similar engagement with one of a consultant on a SOP process review, and they for one particular department as such. And then from the process review, it was coming out that certain areas or aspects of accounting was not complete. So then there was a excuse me. So what happened was, subsequently they got into another engagement for creating the entire accounting manual for the organization finance team. And that is how, I can think of this particular example. And then wherever there are specific areas or specific focus where attention is there, where the more and more risk or controls can be implemented, we engage those kind of firms along with that. So I thought, let me share this example with you guys.
No, absolutely. I think that's very important, and that's what exactly I was trying to convey also. So that's how we have to see, that's blended engagements, folks. Is that clear now? Blended engagements. Thank you, Pramod, for adding that. Is that clear, everyone? Are you all clear with what is assurance, what is consulting, what is blended engagements? Are you all clear? Yes?
Yes.
All right. So now let's read this out. Assurance services. Can I have a volunteer who would like to read assurance services? Anyone would like to go through what is assurance services? Abhinav, you want to go ahead? Alabhya, you want to go ahead? Ankur? Yeah, are you all with me? Atul? Ayushi?
Alabhya this side, I'll go.
Alabhya, please go ahead.
So as per standard, assurance services involve the internal audit's objective assessment of evidence to provide opinions or conclusions regarding an entity, operation, function, process, system, or other subject matters. Accordingly, the IAA glossary defines assurance services as an objective examination of evidence for the purpose of providing an independent assessment of GRC for the organization. Governance, risk management, and control process for the organization.
The nature and scope of the assurance engagements are
determined by the internal auditors. There are three parties involved, which is the process owners, the internal auditors, and the user.
Perfect.
And
assurance services include performing financial performance, compliance, system security, and due diligence. Right, folks? So this is all important. You all need to remember that what are assurance services? This is exactly what we have covered. We have talked about independent, objective examination, providing conclusions regarding entities, operations, functions, process, system, or any other subject matters that we are looking at when we are doing assurance engagement. Folks, entity is something when we're doing an entity level audit, right? So let's say we're talking about the complete organization. Normally, you will see that in a smaller setup that we are doing an entity level audit kind of a thing. The other would be operational aspects of it, and it could be specific to certain operations, let's say production function of the company, let's say business operations of the company. So it could be very specific to operations. Now, other could be functions. Now, what are the functions? There are different functions in the company, right? So HR function, accounts and finance function, marketing function, all of those are different functions. The company, we may be doing audit related to that. Processes, again, there are different business value chains, P2P, H2R, O2C, which is procure to pay, order to cash, hire to retire. All of those are different processes that are seen in the company. We can give assurance on that. Systems, again, we can give assurance on system working, whether the systems are working effectively or not, or any other subject related, any other specific ask or any other specific engagement scope areas. Accordingly, the IAC defines assurance as an objective examination of evidence for the purpose of providing an independent assessment or QRC process for the organization. I think we have already covered. Please do highlight this. This is very important. The nature and scope of assurance engagement. The nature and scope of assurance engagement, this can be asked in the examination, folks. It is determined by internal auditor. Three parties, we are clear, and we are also clear with the types of the engagements. This is again important. What are the different types of engagements? Examiner may ask you, okay, there is a financial engagement review. Is it part of my assurance? Is it part of my consulting? Is it part of my blended engagements? You may end up you may end up putting financial is assurance. There could be another question that may be asked in examination, that there is a engagement which has nature of service both from assurance and consulting point of view. Is it a what assurance engagement, consulting, or blended? Then it becomes a blended engagement. So remember these terminologies. What is blended? What is assurance? What is consulting? Now, can I have another volunteer in who would like to just quickly read the consulting services? Anyone? We have already covered this, but let's quickly cover the GLEM content in detail. Anyone who would like to go, who not participate in? Namrata, you want to go ahead?
Yes, sir.
Please go ahead.
As per the standards, consulting services are advisory in nature and are generally performed at the specific request of an engagement client. Accordingly, the IIA glossary defines consulting services as activities intended to add value and improve an organization's governance, risk management, and control processes without the internal auditor assuming management responsibility. A, the nature and scope of the consulting engagement are subject to agreement with the engagement client. B, generally two parties are participants in consulting services. First, the internal auditor, that is the person or group offering the advice. When performing consulting services, the internal auditor should maintain objectivity and not assume management responsibility. Second, the engagement client, that is the person or group seeking and receiving the advice. And C, consulting services include providing counsel, advice, facilitation, and training.
Thank you. So is that what we have covered already? I think one thing that we need to kind of also throw a little bit more line is without the internal auditor assuming management's responsibility. What did we understood by this? Anyone who would like to throw some light on this? What do we understand by without the internal auditor assuming responsibility? Anyone? Folks, let me tell, okay, I'll take a quick pause before explaining that. See, we need to understand each of this concept very thoroughly. We'll have to go a little slow. You may be assuming that, okay, it's almost 1.5 hours. And we are just on this page number 6, but we'll have to go slow because these are fundamentals. If we will rush on this, we'll not be able to pick well in the next units. Okay, so this is foundation. This is foundation. So we have to go slow. We'll have to understand every aspect of it. We'll have to repeat. We'll have to learn. We'll have to relearn, such that it gets embedded in our mind for the examination. That's one. Second, whenever we are going to try MCQs. We have to go and read the MCQs slowly. We have to read the MCQs very slowly. We'll have to again relate with each of those words that is mentioned in the question. So when it says objectivity, we should understand quickly that, okay, this is objectivity. Whenever it says, okay, it's an assurance service, we should relate to the definition of assurance service. Okay, scope, three parties, the nature of engagements, and expressing an opinion. Sorry, you have to keep yourself.
Green wala.
So you have to relate that every terminology that is mentioned in the question, you have to remember these explanations that we are covering, and that's the reason we are going slow, folks. So are you all good with that? Are you all good with that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so we'll have to read it very slowly. We'll have to read it very carefully. And when we are answering the questions, we have to answer the questions also very carefully. The only reason is we have to score above 80%, even one or two bad questions, even one or two questions where we have interpreted wrong, or where we don't have the fundamental concept clarity, will end up failing the examination, because trust me, scoring 50, 55 is much easier. 60, 65 becomes little tougher. 70, 75 becomes 70, 75% you can only achieve after you have covered the entire content and understood the concept. And scoring 80% is only once you have revised multiple times, you have understood a lot of questions, you have understand the concept very thoroughly, and then you have practiced a lot of MCQs by practically applying these concepts that we are covering. So that's why we are going a little slow. Okay. So yeah. So what does this mean? When it says without the internal auditor assuming management responsibility, I think we are all clear. Other than that, is that clear? Consulting services are advisory in nature. Is that clear, everyone? Yes.
Yes, sir.
We are clear with
yes,
the nature
sir.
and scope. The nature and scope of consulting engagements are subject to. Is it decided by internal auditor itself, or they have to agree with the engagement client?
Engagement
Agree with
Engagement
engagement client.
Right. So there are two parties involved or three parties involved in consulting.
Parties.
There are
Two parties.
Two parties, right? So it will be the internal auditor and the engagement client. And consulting services, what are the examples of consulting services? It includes the counseling,
Counseling, advice,
Facilitation and training.
right? So counseling is, again, we are giving some awareness related aspect. We are counseling what to get into, what not, advisory in nature. Facilitation, folks, again, facilitating workshops, let's say for implementing control self-assessment, facilitating any kind of aspect that is more consulting in nature. So facilitating is where we take role of bringing up people together and kind of help them to accomplish things by just being a facilitator. We don't go really and implement that. We're just facilitating the process. And training is, again, let's say we are providing risk and awareness training where people can go wrong. What are the key considerations that people should take care of? So that's what we need to kind of we can play those roles in the organization. Now, when it says without the internal auditor assuming management responsibility, it's trying to say that we should provide the consulting services more on these aspects. We should not go and implement it. Okay. So let's say we should not start doing that. Okay, this is now whatever was supposed to be done by management. Now let's say we are only doing it. Okay. So when I say that, okay, let's say our role as internal auditors is more to evaluate, right? So our role is more as to provide assurance on various engagements, to help them, to educate them, to bring awareness among the people. But it's not that whatever management is supposed to do, we start doing it. Okay. So I'll give you a quick example for that. Let's say we have, as part of our consulting engagement, we have asked organization in the production process to, let's say, start computing the yield efficiency. Okay. What is yield efficiency now? Yield efficiency is that, okay, my standard says that, okay, this much material I should use to produce something, and what is actually used. So based on that, we compute the yield, right? So this is a recommendation, or this is a consulting services where we have probably, let's say, asked the management to kind of monitor it in a appropriate format. So that is what we can do as a consultant, right? But can we start monitoring that on an ongoing basis, or that needs to be done by the management or by the process owners? That should be done by the internal auditor or by the process owners?
Process owner.
So are you getting it? What I'm trying to say? We should give consulting, which means that, okay, consulting to the extent that, okay, we are facilitating, we are advising, we are helping them to implement. We are not implementing by ourselves. Is that clear? Does that make sense? Okay, yes. Let's say we are saying that, okay, in organization These are the mandatory fields that needs to be filled when we are updating certain master files. So these are just recommendations. These are more consulting nature. We should not start updating their masters, right? Because if you start updating the masters, what are we going to give assurance on later? Is that clear now? Is that clear when it says without the internal auditor assuming management responsibility? Is that clear? We can't do consulting in a nature that we start implementing them. Does that make sense? Whatever management was supposed to do, they should do. We should be more advisory in nature. Yes. I hope that was clear, folks. That is again very important aspect that we need to understand. So with that, we have kind of covered the purpose. I think we are clear with the purpose on the definition. We have covered the three important aspects here. We talk about assurance, we talk about consulting, we talk about blended engagement. Moving on now to next is authority. Now, again, this is very, very important. As I said, one important thing. Yes, please go ahead.
I have a small doubt over here. In the assurance services, the nature and the scope of the engagement has been decided by the internal auditor. So I am just differing on this part. I just wanted to, like, for example, if we have been hired by a statutory body or any regulatory authority to provide, as an internal auditor to perform the activity for an organization, where we are providing the assurance services, there the nature and the scope has already been defined by the regulatory authority or the governing authority. So in that case, we are not the one who is defining the thing, right?
So I'll tell you how it works, because normally the way it works is in any organization that even let's say as a consultant, we get internal audits. So a lot of times it comes directly from the management. But if you see, principally those are agreed by the board. Okay, so now normally internal audit plan and the way it works, and this depends on maturity of the organization as well. And I think that's a very valid question that you kind of highlighted here, which will be giving a lot of insights to other members as well. So let's say how the process works. Normally in any organization, there will be a GRC team, or there will be a internal audit team or internal audit function, and they will create a risk-based internal audit plan. They will create it. Okay, it's the responsibility of the internal audit function to create that risk-based internal audit plan, and that is what they present to the board, and the board approves that risk-based internal audit plan, right? Or they may present it to the audit committee. The audit committee approves that risk-based internal audit plan. So the scope is predetermined by the internal auditors only. It may go and pass across to the senior management, the audit committee, or the board for recommendations and input. But the scope is still determined by the internal audit team. So in the example that you took from a regulatory point of view, so during those regulatory frameworks, when what needs to be covered from an internal audit point of view, that would have come up somewhere from their internal audit teams or the risk management team in themselves who would have recommended. Now they're just passing on to the teams to kind of look into from a scope point of view. But somewhere those scope would have been determined by the internal audit team. And again, because that depends on the maturity of the organization, this is how the IAA recommends for the more matured organization. In a small organization where we don't have employed function, where we don't have a separate risk advisory team, it may be, or the GRC team, it may be possible that these work are kind of managed between the by the senior management themselves, who are discussing with the board, or they may be having outsourced agency who may recommend and agree on that this is what we should propose, and they kind of deliberate, discuss, take their inputs, and then agree on it. But ultimately, for the examination point of view, the nature and scope of this engagement has to be determined by the employer. And that's more important, because see, let's understand, if we are giving assurance on that is something that is kind of whatever is given in scope, out scope. Let's say if we are not determining it, there are high chances that the management will say, okay, don't look onto these areas which are falling into their purview. And that's the whole reason that this authority, or you can say this responsibility is kind of allocated to us to determine.
Yes, I would agree on that. I would agree. I agree on that one, because whatever, like the regulation is also defining the nature and the scope. We, as an internal auditor, we have to accept it, and we have to agree upon that before proceeding for our internal. So yeah, that would be a common point. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Vikas. Yeah, please go ahead.
Hi, so my question was also on the same line. So one is, when we look at nature and scope of assurance engagement, and we talk about timing of audit as well, that is usually done with the collaboration of the process owner. But what we are saying is that that's not really something that the process owner can really define, right? Like the timing of such engagements is something that is purely done by the internal auditor. And I know that there is also like a risk assessment questionnaire, which is usually defined and created. I know in some organizations, some process owners also have a risk assessment questionnaire of their own, but are those also driven by guidelines provided by the internal audit teams, or do we have to like always abide by the RAQs given by the auditor only?
See, how I would say, Ritu, is this is more of a constructive exercises or collaborative as well, right? So normally initial, as I said, let's interpret it more practically. Normally the way we see it is the scope would be determined. What kind of engagement that we want to do this year from assurance standpoint of view, what are the different areas of scope that we would like to do, depending. And nowadays everything we talk about is a risk-based employment plan rather than a traditional approach that, okay, we want to cover these 5 processes or these 10 processes, which was very high level, that okay, these are the broader areas that we want to cover. Now today we are talking about risk-based employment plan. We want to identify what are the broad risks that is there in the company, kind of link back to our activities and actions that are being done in the organization, and then try to identify that, okay, do a risk modeling, understand what is my residual risk, what do the risk priority, and then kind of decide on the frequencies of these engagements, right? So let's say it's something that is very risky, we may choose to do audits on those areas, maybe on quarterly, half-yearly basis, and something that is at a very low risk profile, we may choose to do that audits maybe once in a year or maybe even once in 2 years, let's say. What I'm trying to say, this kind of activity is more done by the internal audit team. Of course, it's always proposed to the senior management and the board for recommendations and their inputs, and that's how they get concurrence on. Of course, until we get a go ahead from them, we'll not be able to achieve what we are trying to achieve, and that is what we will understand in the later part of it when we say organizational independence. When we say that, okay, let's say if there is a scope limitation, let's say if there is a budget related issue, it's actually the impairment of organization independence, because in that case the internal auditor is not getting the adequate leverage, adequate authority to kind of decide on what they want to do it. So that's where the organization independence gets impaired. So it's always said that for assurance engagement, that's the reason the nature and scope has to be determined by the employer. Of course, it needs to get concurrence from the senior management, the board. Regarding the scheduling thing, see, the way I see it is the scheduling is not, it's again an administrative task. So when we were talking about having a dual reporting relationship, right, functionally to the board and administrative to the CEO, administrative is more a day-to-day activity, where when you're talking about scheduling that, okay, we want to do this audit in April or May, or we want to do this audit in June and July. So that's what we agree on based on the availability of the stakeholders, based on the time that they can, even the stakeholders have to kind of spend it, which we have to administratively discuss with the process owners regarding their availability, and also discuss if we are getting a conflict there, we may choose to discuss and take support from the CEO of the company. So that's how we kind of drive this entire thing. Right. So, so what I'm trying to say, I think that's again a very valid question. Ritu, what you've said is nature and scope is determined by the employer. Yes, it is. But if this is not happening, how does it impact? We'll understand it later, that this impairs our organization independence. Okay, this impairs that, okay, if we are unable to do what we are able, what we are supposed to do, be it from a scope limitation point of view, be it from a reporting relationship point of view, be it something from a budget point of view. Let's say we don't have adequate budget to perform what is there in the plan. This is all impact my organization level independence piece. That is an organization related issue, and that's something that will throw more light when we move to the next unit in unit 2. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. So I think we're clear with what we are done with assurance consulting folks. We talk about blended. We're also now clear with when it says that employer should not assume management responsibility. It means that we are not going to implement, or we are not going to do what management is supposed to do. Right? We are doing consulting to the extent that it doesn't impair my objectivity later. We can do counseling, we can do advice. We can't start doing what management is supposed to do. Yeah. Is that clear, everyone, so far? Yes? No?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Great. So now moving on to the next one, which is authority. So can I have a volunteer in? And now this is again very, very important aspect of authority. And after this, we'll take a quick break, folks. With that, we'll kind of cover the first aspect of it. After this, this coverage on authority and responsibility, we'll take a 15 minutes break and then we'll resume. So can I have a volunteer in and can I have everyone in? Because this is again very, very important. As I said, one document that provide you unrestricted access, that provide you unrestricted access to the property, documentation, access rights, what you want in the organization. That one document is called as
Charter, internal audit
charter. Yes. Yes. Nobody want to go ahead to read it. You have a query. Yeah, please. Nobody, you have any query? Raise the hand.
No, I just wanted to speak out that time for the answer.
Yeah, please go ahead. Please go ahead with the thought.
No, I said the answer already.
All right. You wanted to say the answer? Okay. All right. Great. All right. So perfect. So authority, can I have a volunteer in who would like to read the authority piece quickly? Someone who have not participated yet. Folks, the more you participate, the more you will learn, the less effort you have to put in your revision part. Okay. So can I have someone in? Ishita, you want to go
I'll do
ahead
that.
and read?
I'll do that. Bhaswati here.
Ashwati, please go ahead. Yes.
Yeah. Authority. The support of management and the board is crucial when inevitable conflicts arise between the internal audit activity and the department or function under review. Thus, the internal audit activity should be empowered to require auditees to grant access to all records, personnel, and physical properties relevant to the performance of every engagement. A formal chart, should I go in?
Yeah, please go ahead.
A formal charter for the internal audit activity that defines the internal audit activity's purpose, authority, and responsibility must be adopted, and it should contain a grant of sufficient authority. Final approval of the charter resides with the board. The internal audit charter is a subject of subunit.
So that will be the last subunit. So again, as I said, this purpose, authority, responsibility all becomes part of our internal audit charter as well, which we'll have a look towards the end of today's session. But I hope you please do highlight this. This is again important, folks, that the internal audit activity should be empowered to require auditees to grant access to all records, personal and physical properties relevant to the performance of every engagement. And that is kind of that authority is provided with the help of internal audit charter. The last one, internal responsibility. Can I have a volunteer who would like to read responsibility? And the keyword for responsibility is, can anyone tell what is the keyword for responsibility? It is
add value.
Add value, right? Add value. Please remember that. Okay. Anyone? Responsibility?
Yes,
yeah, please go ahead. Just call out your name and go ahead.
Ishita here.
Ishita, please go ahead.
The internal audit activities responsibility is to provide the organization with the assurance and the consulting services that will add value and improve the organization's operations. Specifically, the internal audit activity must evaluate and improve the effectiveness of the organization's governance, risk management, and the control process.
Absolutely. So I think we are all clear with that. We have understood what is assurance, what is consulting, whatever is mentioned here. We are all clear with what we've studied. Let's go back and see whether what was supposed to be covered as part of the first aspect. Have we cleared it? Are you all now clear with mission of internal auditing? Mission of internal auditing is to, can anyone tell quickly before we go on break? Mission of internal auditing is to enhance and protect
organizational values.
It is more enhance and protect organization value. You have to remember that keyword, folks. Can I have everyone saying yes before we go on break, folks? Just quick revision on what we've studied so far. Mission of internal auditing, the keyword is enhance and protect organization value, right? What does IPPF contains? IPPF two things. What are the two things that it contains? IPPF?
Mandatory
guidelines. What is covered in mandatory? Mandatory has four things. What are the four things? It has four things. What are those?
Code of
definition, core principles,
and code of ethics.
So there is some disturbance at someone's end. Please keep yourself on mute, whoever has that. Yeah. All right. So definition of internal auditing, we are all clear? Yes or no? Are we all clear? Definition, the keywords. Can anyone tell the definition of internal auditing? The keywords are?
Add value.
It is independent. Objectivity was the keyword. Assurance, consulting services. Yes. Add value, right? And the GRC process, right? You're all clear with that? Okay. Then the 10 core principles. How many core principles, folks? 10 core principles, right? So we are clear with that. The standards, the 4 types of standards. Are we clear with that? The 4 types of standards are
attribute, performance, interpretation, and
Implementation
implementation.
and implementation.
Okay, just out of curiosity, how many attribute standards? Though it will not be asked in the examination.
19.
And how many performance standards?
33.
All right, very good, very good. And the code of ethics. Now we are getting into the code of ethics eventually, but yes, there are 4 code of ethics as part of our mandatory guidance, which covers integrity, objectivity, confidentiality, and competency, which is what we are going to start in the next part of this session. All right, so let's take a quick break, folks. It's 7:30. Let's connect at 7:33. Let's connect at around 7:45. And let's start with code of ethical conduct for profession. We'll try to cover at least the code of ethics in today's session. And then we'll try to cover internal audit charter if the time permits. If not, otherwise tomorrow we'll do a revision. We'll do the internal audit charter and we'll practice the MCQs. So please stick back to the session. Let's cover the code of ethics. Again, a very, very important and interesting part. We'll go slow. We'll understand this. This is again a lot of that we are going to study in today's session will become our base for unit 2 as well. So let's see, objectivity that we are going to study today, it will be an extended session or extended understanding that we're going to understand in subunit 2 also. Sorry, the unit 2 itself, which is 40% of the part 1 program, folks. So that's why the next piece on the code of ethics is very, very important. So I think I've already taken some time. It's already 7:35. So let's connect at 7:50. All right. So let's take a 15 minutes break.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Can I quickly hear the word yes from everyone so that I know everyone has resumed?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, great. Vinay, Vijaya, Vaibhav, Sundaram, are you all with us? Sumant, Rohit?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Perfect. So let's start. Moving on. So now we are moving on to the second aspect of the subunit, folks. We have already covered the first subunit where we have spent significant time, almost 2 hours on the first 6 pages. The whole idea was to spend that kind of a time for a reason that we're able to understand it thoroughly. Okay, we are able to understand our fundamental concepts. Now moving on to the second aspect of it, which is just a 1-pager thing, which is on code of ethical conduct for professionals. That's our second subunit, code of ethical conduct for professionals. Here we are going to just quickly understand what are the reasons for code of ethical conduct, what is the primary purpose of having the code of ethical conduct. So that's something that we need to learn, remember. And we are going to cover aspects of code of ethical conduct. To enhance the code of ethics, what it should provide. As I said, there's one important thing that is mentioned in the content, which is something that we need to remember, that if you have to enhance the code of ethics, what the code of ethics should provide. That's we have to remember. And then we are going to cover the components or the elements of code of ethical conduct. That's nothing. That's just the 4 components, the 4 types of code of ethics, the 4 types of 4 elements of code of ethics. That's nothing. It's integrity, objectivity, confidentiality, and competency. So we'll just understand that in brief. So let's quickly start that with coverage of the GLEM content. So the first thing is reason for code of ethical conduct, folks. The first ask is, what is the primary purpose of code of ethical conduct, right? So what is the primary purpose? You all need to remember that the primary purpose of code of ethical conduct, folks, is to promote ethical culture. Is that clear? Can you all read that together? Can you all say that together? What is the primary purpose of code of ethical conduct? You have to remember that the primary purpose of code of ethical conduct is to promote ethical culture among professionals in the organization. Okay, perfect. So that's the primary purpose. And let me, the reason I'm emphasizing, folks, please, all of you would have probably, many of you would have been taking the sessions for the first time. And maybe a couple of you who have taken part 2, part 3 separately with me, since we have a lot of new members. I'm just trying to emphasize on these words only for the reason that the examiner will ask you on the same pattern. Examiner will ask you, okay, what is the primary purpose of code of ethical conduct? And it will give you all the right purposes in the option. Now you have to look for this word, promote an ethical culture in the company. So that's the reason I'm emphasizing. And that is what you need to learn. Remember that, okay, in the examination, if the examiner is going to ask me that what is the primary purpose of code of ethical conduct, I have to look for these words. Okay. What is the most important responsibility of the implementer? I have to look for that word add value. What is the primary use of questionnaires? What is the primary use of flowcharts? What is the primary use of process mapping? What is the primary use of interviews? I'm just trying to give you the perspective that these are the ways that the examiner will ask you in the question, and all the answers will look correct. But we have to look for these words, and that's the reason I'm emphasizing. Is that making sense to you all? Yes or no? Can I quickly hear the word yes from everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes, no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. So please highlight, please remember, and whenever you are reading, revising, focus that way. Talk to yourself, read the content in this way that, okay, the primary purpose is promote an ethical culture. That's how you have to read it, even when you're revising it, okay? The primary purpose of a code of ethical conduct for a professional organization is to promote an ethical culture among professionals who serve others. Additional functions of a code of ethical conduct for a professional organization include communicating acceptable values to all members, establishing objective standards against which individuals can measure their own performance, and communicating the organization value to outsiders. So of course, guys, if we have the code of ethical conduct in place in the organization, we can share the same code of ethical conduct to the outsiders that no, we follow this code of ethical conduct. So principally, you also have to kind of follow this. So it communicates the organization values to outsiders. Then second part is that, okay, one can measure the performance against the code of ethical conduct. And the third is it gives a lot of acceptable, lots of messages on the values that the organization is want to pass on to the members of the company, right? So basically, these are additional aspects or additional functions of the code of ethical conduct, but the primary purpose still stays the same, that it promotes the ethical culture. Is that clear? Are you all clear with reasons for code of ethical conduct? Are we clear on primary purpose and additional functions?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Moving on to the next
Yes,
part
sir.
now, aspects of code of ethical conduct. So there is another important thing that we need to remember, that is to enhance code of ethics, it should provide for what? It should provide for disciplinary action in case of violations. Now, this is again something that you need to remember, learn, read, that, okay, in the code of ethics, just by having the code of ethics, okay, tell me first thing, if the company has written a code of ethics, if it has a document in place, can we say that, okay, they are following also or not? Can we say that just by having the document?
No.
No,
No,
right?
sir.
So
No.
that is one aspect of it. Just by having a code of ethical conduct written and documented doesn't mean the organization is following. The organization needs to give adequate training to the people. It should be measured. It should be reviewed. And the most important part in the code of ethics is again to cover an aspect that in case there is any violation of this code of ethics, there will be a disciplinary action that will be taken. Okay, so very, very important is to enhance the effectiveness of code of ethics, code of conduct. What is required in the code of ethics? Can anyone tell me what is required to be documented? It should document the
mode of disciplinary action which will be taken against
the
any
disciplinary
violation.
action for violators. So it should have something that, okay, this if in case anyone is found to not comply to the code of ethical conduct, then there could be a disciplinary action for violators. Okay, so that is again something that you need to remember. Now let's read this out. It says that aspects of code of ethical conduct, it says the mere existence of a code of ethical conduct does not ensure that its principles are followed or that those outside the organization will believe that it is trustworthy. So is that what we have covered? It says that the mere existence of code of ethical conduct does not ensure that its principles are followed or that those outside the organization will believe that it is trustworthy. A measure of the cohesion and professionalism of an organization is the degree of voluntary compliance with its adopted code. A code of ethical conduct worded so as to reduce the likelihood of members being sued for substandard work would not earn the confidence of the public. So if a code of conduct is such worded that it will reduce the likelihood of members being sued for substandard work. So if there is no such process, then it will reduce the confidence of the code of conduct of the public. A code of ethical conduct can help establish minimum standards of competence, but it is impossible to require equality of competence by all members of a profession. So it's more of a that's competency we read as a individual aspect, or we read it as more of a team aspect. We read it as a folks, are you all with me? Can I quickly hear the word yes from everyone? I know there are more than 39 folks. Are you all with me?
Yes.
All what we are covering is important.
Yes.
Trust me, these individual lines will be asked on different various ways, and this is what we are going to understand when we are going to practice questions in the session itself. It looks very simple, but when the examiner asks you, all this is how we have to relate and remember it. Okay. So again, asking you the same question is, it says that a code of ethical conduct can help in establish minimum standards of competence, but it is impossible to require equality of competence by all members of profession. So competency is what individual level thing, or it's more of a team level, collective thing that we look for.
Team level.
Team level, right? So that's what we have to remember. And then finally, please highlight this. It says to enhance the code of ethical conduct effectiveness, the code should provide for disciplinary action for violators. So can you all read this line together? To enhance its effectiveness. Can you all read this line together? It says
violators.
Perfect. Moving on now to, as I said, typical components of code of ethical conduct. So we said that it covers the following 4 elements or code of ethics. It covers integrity, objectivity, confidentiality, competency. Now we have already cleared our base, so it will be easy for us to kind of understand this. Integrity is more when we are working from honesty. We are not getting any act which is illegal. We are not becoming party to an illegal act. We are not passing on discreditable. We are not passing discreditable comments to or making the profession discreditable, right? So integrity, it says a refusal to compromise professional values for personal gain. Another facet of integrity is performance of professional duties in accordance with the relevant laws. So when we move forward, we'll understand more in detail. At this point of time, this is the brief about integrity. Objectivity is commitment to providing stakeholders with unbiased information. Another facet of objectivity is a commitment to independence and independence from conflict of economic or professional interest. Confidentiality, a refusal to use organization information for private gain, and competency is again a commitment to acquire and maintain an appropriate level of knowledge and skill. So these are the 4 elements or principles of the IA Code of Ethics. In fact, here the 4 code of very briefly on the 4 components of Code of Ethical Conduct. Are you all clear? Yes. All right. So now moving on to the next part is on internal audit active. Folks, are you all with me? Yes. Can you hear me loud and clear? Yeah. Okay. Yes. So now moving on to the next subunit 1.3 to 1.7, it says internal audit ethics. So here now we are going to cover a lot in detail, and this will be the most important aspect of the balance part of today's unit. We'll try to at least cover 1.3 to 1.7 in today's session. Only if time permits, we'll move to internal audit charter, because surely in exam you will see at least 2-3 questions around internal audit charter. So I'll not like to rush it towards the end of the session. Only if time permits, we'll cover this. Otherwise, we'll revise it tomorrow. But let's cover more in detail from 1.3 to 1.7. We're going to cover applicability of the provision of Code of Ethics. It's again very important to understand that this Code of Ethics, is it applicable only to CIAs or the members of internal auditors, or is it applicable to everyone who is in the internal audit profession? Second is understanding these principles, understanding different principles. So we have 4 principles for integrity, 3 principles for objectivity. Similarly, count of principles for confidentiality and competency. We'll have to read that. Then examples of violation of these things. Okay, so we'll understand, okay, in which case it will say that, okay, we have employers have violated integrity or employers have violated objectivity. So that's what we are going to learn and understand, because in the examination, again, the examiner will ask on these questions that, okay, there has been a case, let's say, for example, there was a conflict of interest between the internal auditor and the auditee, which means that the person was his friend, and the person was a relative. In that case, is it violating my integrity? Is it violating my objectivity, confidentiality, competency? So that's how we have to relate and answer the question. Okay. So that's about this, what we are going to learn. Again, very interesting part of the unit, folks. So let's start with the first one. It says introduction, internal audit ethics, introduction and principles. It says that IA incorporates the definition into the introduction to the Code of Ethics and specifies the reason for establishing the code. Applicability. Now, this is again important. What is your answer? Is it only applicable, the Code of Ethics is only applicable to CIAs or IA members, or everyone who is in the IA profession?
To everyone.
To everyone. Please remember that this is again important. The provisions of the code are applied broadly to all organizations and persons who perform internal audit services, not just CIAs and the members of the IA. Please do highlight this. Please do remember that the provision of the codes are applied broadly to all organizations and persons who perform internal audit services, not just CIAs or the members of the IA. Violation of rules of ethics should be reported to the IA Board of Directors. So the Institute of Internal Audit Board of Directors, if anyone is violating the rules of ethics, it should be reported to the IA Board of Directors. Now again, coming on the principles, as I said, it says the rule of conduct is the code are organized based on the principles of integrity, objectivity, confidentiality, and competency. So this is again the purpose. It covers the definition, folks. So I'm skipping this. It says, moving on, it says the code of ethics is necessary and appropriate for the profession of internal auditing, founded as it is on the trust based in its objective assurance about GRC process. The Institute Code of Ethics extends beyond the definition to include two essential components: principles that are relevant to the profession and practice of internal auditing, rules of conduct that describe behavior norms expected out of the internal auditors. These rules are an aid to interpreting the principles into practical applications and are intended to guide the ethical conduct of internal auditors. Internal auditors refers to the institute members, recipients, or candidates of the for IA professional certifications, and those who perform internal audit services within the definition of internal auditing. Again, applicability and enforcement of the Code of Ethics. It says the Code of Ethics applies to both entities and individuals that perform internal audit services. So it applies to the entity as well as the internal audit team. For IA members and recipient of candidates for IA professional certification, breaches of the Code of Ethics will be evaluated and administered according to the institute bylaws and administrative directives. The fact that a particular conduct is not mentioned in the rules of conduct does not prevent it from being unacceptable or discreditable, and therefore the member, certification holder, or candidate can be liable for disciplinary action. So again, this is not important. This is just the covering from coverage point of view. Wherever it is more important, I'll throw a lot of more emphasis, folks. Moving on now to coming on the principles. So internal auditors are expected to apply and uphold the following principles, which is again integrity, objectivity, confidentiality, competency. So this is again, we have covered integrity. Internal auditors, the integrity of internal auditors establish trust. Now this is again key word. Integrity, the key word is it establishes trust. Can you all read that together? Integrity of internal auditors establish trust. Okay, so please highlight that. Remember that, okay, whenever we are looking for words related to integrity, look for these words like trust as well. So integrity of internal auditors establish trust and thus provides the basis for reliance on their judgment. Okay, let's say, is it possible, okay, tell me, is it possible that, okay, the management doesn't trust the internal audit function? Can we provide management with a report that they can rely on our judgment? Can we do that? Without integrity, will management rely on us?
No.
Never, right? So that's why integrity of the internal auditors establishes the trust and thus provides us the basis of reliance, thus provides the basis for reliance on their judgment. Moving on to objectivity, it says internal auditors exhibit the highest level of professional objectivity in gathering, evaluating, and communicating information about the activity or process being examined. Internal auditors make a balanced assessment of all the relevant circumstances and are not unduly influenced by their own interests or by others in forming judgments. I'll take a pause here to kind of throw some light on objectivity because it's very, very important. And trust me, you will see a lot of questions coming in the examination from objectivity. So though this topic objectivity is covered in detail in Unit 2 as well, but let me throw some light here itself so that we are clear on the fundamentals. So before that, can I hear everyone saying yes if you are all with me on this important aspect that I'm going to cover on objectivity?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So objectivity now. Folks, objectivity, let's try to understand two things. So we have one is independence. Okay. The second is objectivity. Though independence is not covered here, it's covered in Unit 2, but I'm just sharing some thought around it. Independence is whenever we read independence, we read it from an organization point of view. Okay. So you have to read this content accordingly. Whenever we are looking from independence, we talk about organizational independence. Okay. So we are talking from an organization level attribute. When we talk about objectivity, we are talking about individual internal auditors. Okay. So objectivity is an attribute of individual internal auditors. Is that clear? First of all, can we have a fundamental rule? Organization independence is organization level attribute. Objectivity is what level attribute? Is it organization level or individual internal auditors?
Individual internal auditors.
Okay.
Individual level.
Now let's understand with various examples. Okay. When can we say objectivity will get impaired? Okay, let's understand. Internal auditor is auditing for an area where the person himself or herself was acting as a, let's say, head of that function in the last 1 year. Okay, let's say, let's take an example. Let's say I was the procurement head of the company. I have moved to the internal audit function within a year time. Now within a year, from when I move to the new role, I'm going back and checking my own area which I have worked on in the last 1 year. It will impair the objectivity, right?
Correct.
So are you clear with first example? What I'm trying to say, we are trying to say that when the internal auditor want to audit for himself or herself the areas that they have performed that may impair the objectivity. Right? Is that clear?
Yes.
Example 1 is clear? Second.
Yes.
Let's take second example. Objectivity, the second example is, let's say, conflict of interest. Now, let's try to understand objectivity. The keywords are unbiased mental attitude and the conflict of interest. Let's say if we are auditing an area where the auditee or the process owners is a relative. In that case, again, if we are going to audit that area, it impairs the objectivity. Now, before getting into more examples, let me share some thoughts on the definition of objectivity. Folks, the terminology, and then we move forward, you'll understand this more in detail. Objectivity says that it is impaired or presumed to be impaired. Now, what does it mean? What do we mean by impaired or presumed to be impaired? What do we understand by the word presume? Anyone? What do we understand by the word presume? Presumes means looks like, right? It's presumed to be impaired. Are you all with me? Yes, no?
Yes, yes.
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 Yes, sir.
Seems to be impaired.
Yeah, so you all have to participate, folks, otherwise we lose interest. So yeah, are you all clear what I'm trying to say? Objectivity, the definition is it is impaired or presumed to be impaired. Now let's take an example. The examiner is giving you a question. It says that, okay, you are an auditor, or let's say there is an auditor who goes to audit for an area where it is headed by the relative of the auditor. And let's say the auditor has all the working papers right, appropriately, well managed and documented. So they have the right scoping document, proper engagement planning, all the work papers ready, detailed data analytics, checks, verification done, all the audit findings have been highlighted, everything has been taken care of by the auditor. So precisely, is he impairing? Is the auditor impairing objectivity at this point of time? Let's talk about, is you impairing?
Oh.
Yes or no?
It can be told as presumed to be impaired.
Yes.
Because he is having
presumed to be
direct
impaired
relationship.
Yes. So now let's say if I'm an outsider, if I'm a management, if I'm a user, if I know that, okay, this person is a relative of ABC person and the person is going to audit for them, it will presume to be impaired.
Great.
Okay. So objectivity says it is impaired or presumed to be impaired. Are you clear now? So
Yes.
even if you have all the
Yes,
working
sir.
papers in place, it will still impair the objectivity because it comes under the condition of presumed to be impaired. Is that clear?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Alright.
Arpit, to this, I would just like to kind of add.
Please call out your
when,
name, whoever is speaking. Sorry.
Hi, this is Rohit here. So
Yeah, Rohit, please go ahead.
on objectivity, I would just like to kind of highlight that last year when I got similar example that you gave of change of the role. So when I changed my role from accounting to auditing, so I did what we have seen is every year we, as per the IIA rules, we get a form which says a conflict of interest, wherein we need to kind of normally disclose if
yes.
we have kind of worked in the previous profile, where and all which entities, what work we have actually done, so that that helps the audit committee to create a plan for the internal auditor, making sure that he is not auditing the areas wherein he has already worked for the previous 1 year.
Right. So that's very valid. Just I think you have used the word audit committee to plan. It's more the CAE to plan and take the approval of audit. So it's the CAE responsibility to ensure the objectivity piece, not the audit committee. Yeah, but thanks for that point. I think that's well said. So conflict of interest is important. Yeah, Ritu, you want to have a query? I have many more examples to cover, so there will be a lot more clarity. But yes, Ritu, go ahead.
No, I was just trying to add that the presumption of objectivity getting impaired can also be because there can be an inadvertent miss, because sometimes there are a lot of complexities in different roles, and when people change roles, I think in those cases also it is considered as impaired even if it is inadvertent, and it was purely like a miss, not really because of lack of knowledge, but it was just too complex or too unknown, and that's why I think it is still considered as impaired if you only realize later that there has been a conflict of interest once it has happened.
So those aspects we'll cover eventually when we understand that, okay, what CAE should do in case the CAE get to know that there has been any violation or any impairment that has happened all across different code of ethics or standards, whatever it is. We'll cover those aspects later, but let's focus now on objectivity. Thank you, Mithun, for adding that. So objectivity, are we clear on the two examples? We'll talk about self-review. We have talked about doing audit in an area where a close friend or a relative is the auditee, right? So that is the second aspect. Okay, tell me, so far in the first two examples, are we talking about an organization level thing or we are talking about an individual level thing?
Individual.
Right?
Individual
So
level.
examples are right there. So let's talk about a third example, which is accepting gifts. Okay, accepting gifts of so let's say I'm an auditor. I've been to a client place and the client has kind of given a gift which has been accepted. So it will impair the objectivity, yes or no? Yes. All right. So let's say there is an assignment that got closed 6 months earlier. Okay, so 6 months earlier, 6 months down the line, after 6 months of completion the engagement, let's say the auditor is receiving a gift from the auditee. Can now the auditor can accept the gift?
No, should not ideally.
Not, right? The person should still not accept the gift because it will lead to what? Impairment or presumed to impair?
Presumed to be impaired.
Presumed to impairment.
Now let's say take a third example, again on the same lines. Let's say we have accepted the gift, but we have all the working papers, we have all the documentation, we have the right skill set, right things that have been highlighted. We have all the coverage. In fact, we have highlighted a lot of significant important points. But still, if you have accepted the gift, it will impair or presume to be impair, or will it impair objectively? Yes or no?
It will be
Presumed to
be impair, right? So that still impairs the objectivity, right? So that's again third example. Another fourth example I cover from objectivity point of view is, folks, let's say sometimes what we do is, let's say we are familiar with our auditee. So sometimes what happens is, let's say we are doing audit, sometimes the auditee team member is concurrently doing an audit of an organization or audit of a team. So basically, it leads to a lot of familiarity or a lot of familiarity between auditor and auditee. Can that also impair objectivity?
Yes.
Yes. It does. It does. Yes. These may encourage impairment of objectivity. Okay. Sometimes what we have done is, let's say we would have practically also seen it. Let's say last year in 2021, when we were auditing for an area in an organization, we kind of had did a detailed review, and we really didn't find anything. Let's say when we move to the next year, 21-22, for the same area, can we presume to say that, okay, in this area there will be no issue? If we are doing that, are we impairing the objectivity?
Yes.
Right. So that is again impairing to the objectivity. Now, all these examples that we've talked about so far, we've talked about accepting gifts, we've talked about conflict of interest, we've talked about
relatives.
Presumption of work. All of this is what? This is individual level thing or organization level thing?
Individual level.
Individual.
That's why it's impairing the objectivity, right? Let's say we have distorted all the important information. Let's say we have not communicated the right set of information to the seniors, to the CAE, to take it up with the board. So in that case, it is impairing the objectivity, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. So that is again impairing the objectivity. Okay, I'll take one example. Let's say I'm an internal auditor. I have found a relatively an important and significant point during the internal audit exercise. I have informed to the chief audit executive. Now, chief audit executive have not informed to the board. Am I impairing the objectivity? Am I the internal auditor impairing the objectivity? Yes or no?
No.
Who's impairing the objectivity in this case? It is the
CAE.
Perfect. So this is how we have to clear the concepts. We'll cover more examples, folks. But are you clear so far? Now let's read this out. It says internal auditor exhibit the highest level of professional objectivity in gathering, evaluating, and communicating information. So are you clear now? Objectivity, the keyword is unbiased mental attitude, avoiding the conflict of interest. So internal auditors is exhibiting the highest level of professional objectivity in gathering. So whenever they are gathering the information, it should be unbiased. It should not have any conflict of interest. Whenever the internal auditor is evaluating, it should be unbiased and it should not have any conflict of interest. Whenever they are communicating, it should be unbiased and should not have any conflict of interest. Are you able to relate now? Are you clear? Whenever you are reading objectivity, you may choose to replace it with the with what does objectivity is all about. It's about unbiased and it's about not having conflict of interest, right? So are you able to relate this terminology better now? Internal auditors exhibit the highest level of professional objectivity in gathering, evaluating, communicating information about the activity or process being examined. Internal auditors make a balanced assessment of all the relevant circumstances and are not unduly influenced by their own interest or by others in forming the judgment. Is that clear now? Are you all clear broadly on objectivity? We'll have to repeat this multiple times, so there will be a lot more clarity coming in. But are you clear so far about integrity and objectivity? Yes?
Yes.
So let's move forward. It covers confidentiality now. So we all understand confidentiality. Normally, as part of any onboarding exercise that we see, we'll have a non-disclosure agreement in place. The whole idea is that, okay, people are not able to use the information that they're obtaining in the professional professional journey or professional career. They're not using it for their personal gain. So confidentiality is all about it. It says internal auditors respect the value and ownership of information they receive and do not disclose information without appropriate authority unless there is a legal or professional obligation to do so. Now, this is again very important. So, let's say if we have identified any such important information as part of a review. Let's say there is a potential gain in the company, and we are taking buying the shares of the company. Are we violating the confidentiality? Are we violating confidentiality clause? Let's say we are seeing that the organization is going to make gains and are going to report gains, and we are going and buying the shares of the company, which is in a form of like an insider trading. Is it by we are violating confidentiality? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So let's say there is a lot of information that we have seen during our internal audit. And let's say there is a legal court order that says that, okay, you disclose this information. Can we as employers can do that?
Yes.
Definitely.
Please remember that we can do that. It clearly says that the standards or even the code of ethics, it says that if it is a legal or professional obligation to do so, we can share the information. If it is against the court order, then we can share the information. Okay, so internal auditors respect the value and ownership of information they've received and do not disclose information without appropriate authority. So what is appropriate authority? Again, it depends on the criticality of the information. It could be management, it could be senior management, it could be board, unless there is a legal or professional obligation to do so. Competency, internal auditors apply the knowledge, skill, and experience needed in the performance of internal audit services. Okay, so we should apply the knowledge, skill, and experience needed in the performance of internal audit services. Okay, are we all clear briefly on the principles? As in, we are clear with what is integrity, briefly, objectivity, confidentiality, competency? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes.
So now let's cover the rules of conduct, where we will cover more in detail on the principles. So the first one is integrity. Now it will cover all that we've talked about. So internal auditors shall perform their work with honesty, diligence, and responsibility, shall observe the law and make disclosure expected by the law and the profession, shall not knowingly become a party to an illegal activity or engage in acts that are discreditable to the profession of internal auditing or to the organization, shall respect and contribute to the legitimate and ethical objectives of the organization. So please again, this is again important, folks. You need to remember integrity. It's talking about trust. It's talking about honesty. It's talking about diligence. It's talking about the responsibility. Okay. So the examiner may ask you, instead of honesty, diligence, and responsibility, the examiner may give you other options. Okay, integrity, the organization may ask you, give you option of add value, let's say. But will we look for add value as an option, or we look for honesty and trust as an option in integrity?
Honesty, diligence, and
so are you getting confused what I'm trying to say? I'm trying to say that, see, we know that there's a keyword add value also. But when it comes to integrity, we look for which are the keywords? We look for honesty and trust as a keyword, right? Rather than add value. Add value, we look for more from an internal audit purpose. Right, so that's how we have to link these words. All right, so I think this is clear, folks. So these are the 4 principles. Again, you don't have to memorize, but learn to kind of relate back that whether we are violating integrity, objectivity, confidentiality, or competency. So moving on next to the next 3 principles. So integrity, we have 4 principles. Objectivity, we have 3 principles. Let's read one by one. It says internal auditor shall not participate in an activity or relationship that may impair or be presumed to impair their unbiased assessment. The participation includes those activities or relationships that may conflict with the interest of the organization. So when we said that, okay, we are going to audit for the area that we have done last year, we were having the functional responsibility for that. It will impair or presume to be impaired. When we said conflict of interest example, so that is covered here in this example. The next is shall not accept anything that may impair or be presumed to impair their professional judgment. Again, accepting gifts, fees, or anything else. bonus kind of thing. So that again says accept anything that we appear or presume to appear their professional judgment. Disclose all material facts known to them that if not disclosed may distort the reporting of activities under review. So again, this is part of audit. Moving on to confidentiality, again, there are two principles on confidentiality. It says, shall be prudent in use and protection of information acquired in the course of their duties, shall not use information for any personal gain or in any manner that would be contrary to the law or detrimental to the legitimate and ethical objectives of the organization. And then we have competency, folks. It says, shall engage only in those services for which they have necessary knowledge, skills, and experience, shall perform employed services in accordance with the IPPF framework, shall continually improve their proficiency and effectiveness and quality of their service. Now, I have two examples to ask you guys in this competency. All right, so let's say I am a senior internal auditor. Can I quickly hear the word yes from everyone? Are you all with me? We have 35 plus folks. Are you all with me?
Yes.
All right. So I have one example from you all. So let's say I'm 20 plus years of experience candidate. Okay, I have 20 plus years of experience. All right, so I'm working for the last couple of years in the internal audit profession only, and I've been continually doing various types of engagements. Okay, I'm continually doing various types of engagements. Can I say that, okay, I really don't have to go for any trainings, I don't need to upgrade my competency, I don't have to do continuous professional development? Can I say that, and I'm still, or will not be violating competency code of ethics?
Yes, it will be a violation.
It will be a violation, or it will not be a violation. I have enough experience. I'm learning on the job.
It will be a violation.
Still a violation.
It will be a violation.
So it doesn't matter that you are a chief audit executive. It doesn't matter that you are a senior internal auditor. You have to continuously develop yourself. You have to have a continue professional development, and we'll understand that when we'll cover it later, folks. That if you're a CIA or if you're practicing internal audit, normally the Institute of Internal Audit says that you should get done of at least 40 hours of continuing professional development trainings. And someone who is not practicing in the internal audit profession, let's say if I am a certified internal auditor, but I'm taking a role of a procurement head of a company, which means that I'm not practicing as an internal auditor anymore. In that case, if I want to maintain my designation of CIA, I should do at least 20 hours of a training in a year. Is that clear on the competency? Are we clear on the first example? Even whatever level of experience that we have to continue developing ourselves professionally, right? Is that clear? Yes or no? Yes. All right. So second example that we took at the beginning of the session also. Let's say there is a warehouse management audit that is going to happen, or let's say there is an ITGC audit that's going to happen in the next 2 months. Okay, and we don't have any experience so far, but we have decided that okay, or the organization have decided that they will be giving enough training in this 2 months so that you can take it up that internal audit assignment. So are you still are you still violating competency if you are able to complete those trainings before the audit?
No.
Right. So if you've done enough trainings, if you have gone through under the process of training, learning in the process, then you're not violating. But let's say if you have accepted it as it is, you have not undergone any trainings for that matter, and you're going and performing that, are you violating competency?
Yes.
Yes or no? Right. So is it now the last example? Is it looked at an individual internal auditor level, or is it looked at a team level?
Individual
level.
Team level.
No. So
that team level. Sorry, it's
this is where we have to remember. It is at a team level. Okay, let's take an example. I'm a fresher, BCom graduate, BCom honors graduate. I come to join any of the team of the internal audit team. I've been assigned to do a P2P review. Do you think I will have enough knowledge to do a P2P audit?
No.
Yes or no?
No.
I have another team member who's a team lead who has 2 years of experience doing P2P audit or various other similar engagements. I'm working and supporting him or her in the audit. Am I still violating competency?
No.
Okay, let's take another example. Let's say this second team lead, and now we are performing an ITGC audit. So neither I have a knowledge and neither the team lead has a knowledge. But let's say the supervisor has sufficient knowledge, and day in, day out, the supervisor is supervising the team lead and the team member to kind of review this engagement. Are we still violating competency?
No.
Right? So this is how we have to see. We have to see that how the quality is ensured, how the entire team is learning the process. This is more of a collective team results. Is that clear now? Are we clear with those examples, everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
So before you move further, I have a question.
All right. Yeah, please go ahead. That's so much, right?
Yes, sir, Suman this side. So,
Yeah.
sir, suppose we are providing internal audit service to a client vis-a-vis an organization itself has an internal audit team. So here we are talking about this integrity, objectivity in terms of internal audit. Like outside person will do the internal audit of any organization. Vis-a-vis
No, this is more for internal. This is also for the internal function of the company.
And so, sir, when, like you have earlier talked about the shift of change of role. So someone like a procurement head moves to head of internal audit function, and he has to do the internal audit of procurement. And say, for example, like while we review the vendor master, some procurement team members are part of like were part of the vendors for the procurement area. So in this respect, how do we segregate the objectivity of an internal auditor from an outside organization or
very interesting, very interesting question. Okay, I think this is a very valid question. Did everyone understood what Suman is saying? Is that okay? We have a group of 4, and Suman, correct me if I'm wrong in understanding your question as well. The way I see it is, Suman is saying that okay, I have 5 team members in my team. Okay, out of the 5 team members, there are people who have probably worked with the vendors earlier. Okay, let's say they were in a different company where they were working, and they worked with the vendors. Now they've joined us as internal audit team members. Now, if we have to kind of ensure that these people are not impairing the objectivity, what we as a CA will take a role, right? Is that your question, Suma? Yes or no? Is that your question?
Sir. Yes.
So this is exactly what I wanted to convey, and this is a very good question, Suman. Thank you for asking that. So in this case, Suman, CA has to ensure that that objectivity doesn't get impaired, which means that during the engagement planning exercise, the CA needs to ensure that okay, there is not this team member is not chosen for that engagement. Let's say for that could be one potential case. Let's say there are 3 team members, and all those 3 members are from that department or that function or that vendor. In that case, from a resource planning point of view, the CA may choose to bring an external service provider and get that audit done rather than getting it done by their own team member. So it's the CA responsibility to ensure that this objectivity doesn't get impaired. Does that make sense now?
Yes. Thank you.
And what do you think? This is a one-time exercise. Everyone, is it a one-time exercise that okay, CA will do it, check once during the joining process, just whether the conflict of interest happens or not, or this is an ongoing process. At least on an annual basis, the CA should ensure that the team, what are the developments, relationships, conflict of interest being developed among the people, among the team members, and based on that, this assessment of objectivity can be assessed better. What do you think? Is it a one-time or should be a continuous process?
Should be one
recurring.
It's a continuous process.
Should be a continuous process. So this is how you have to see it. Yes. Do we have any questions? Yes, I think so.
Yes, Arpit. If in case we do not have expertise in department, but we have asked to do by external agency, then competency will meet or no?
It will still meet, but we have.
That's Kapil, right? That's the question by Kapil. All right. So your question is that we don't have adequate expertise in the team together, and we have been asked to do an audit of an area. Should we go ahead and do it? Yes. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So one is that no. One is that no. Sorry. Yeah, Labia, you want to go and answer this?
Yeah, if I can.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead. No,
okay. So I think that I mean, if we do not have the competency required, so yes, we cannot do that. But if the management really asks that to do that, first of all, the CA can decline if there is no external support given, or if there is no one in the audit team competent enough to perform the audit. However, if we have the external support would be, for example, even like an external auditor. In that perspective, we can, or the third point that we can do is that, example, if the audit engagement is almost now 2 quarters from now, so we can conduct a training of the auditors who would be assigned to that engagement, and then we can do. So in that case, the competency would not be impaired.
Right. So we can decline, is what Alabia is saying, Kapil, is we can decline, and we can pick the engagement if there's a time gap by giving trainings. And the third is we can bring in some external subject matter expert to support on that assignment. It could be an external resource.
Okay, thank you.
Prachit, yes, you have any question? You want to add something?
Yeah, Arpit, I just want to know, like, wouldn't it be a competency non-compliance? Because as per that, we should be resourceful.
Yes,
Like
yes,
the
we should be
team should be
resourceful.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. See, when we'll understand later about the resource piece, then we'll understand that normally the resources are two categories of resources. We call it as internal resources and external resources. Okay, internal resources are our team members, and we need to kind of periodically assess the competency among the people based on the different varieties of engagements that they have done, based on the industry experience they come up during the interview process. We know, okay, these are the areas that they have worked during the year, what they have worked during the year, what are the trainings that they've got. So all of that is based on which we kind of do, based on which we as in the CAE kind of assess the skill assessment in the team. So that's how the internal team is assessed across skill set. And then, and that's kind of also considered during the hiring process as well. The second is the external resources where we see that externally we are bringing in someone where we have lack of resources. But what you're saying is correct. Let's say we don't have the budget. Let's say we don't have adequate expertise in that in the team, and the organization is not allowing to do it. Then it becomes an organization level impairment rather than a individual level impairment. But let's say CAE along with the team members accept the engagement which they don't have competent on. It doesn't become an organization level impairment. It becomes an individual level impairment. So that's where objectivity gets impaired. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right, so I have one question to everyone. I think that's well addressed, but very simple question. When we talk about external resources, what do you think? Independence and objectivity against need to be ensured during hiring of that external resources. Can I say that, okay, I have to do ITGC audit and I can pick someone from the team of the IT team of that company? Can I pick? Can I pick that? No. So when it comes to external resources, please ensure that that person or that team member should also be independent and objective. Okay, the person cannot be hired from a engagement client themselves. Yeah, is that clear? Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Very good. So good participation, folks. I think we have kind of covered broadly on the various principles. So we have 4 principles on integrity. Again, you have to kind of reread so that it gets kind of stick to your mind that what are the keywords that we're looking at. Objectivity, again, I think they're all clear, presumed to impaired about unbiased assessment, conflict of interest, accepting gifts, and disclosing of material facts. Our confidentiality, we've already covered that we should not use it for personal gain and we should be prudent in use of those information and competency. We should only engage in those services where we have the knowledge, skill set, and experience. We should perform the work as per the standards and the IPPF framework, and we should continue to improve. So irrespective of the years of experience that we have, we should still continue to improve by just saying that, okay, I have so much of years of experience. So it doesn't mean that I am not, I should not be doing this. I'm still responsible, or I need to kind of continue to increase my professional development to improve better. And that if I'm not doing it, then we're violating the competency. Yes, Rohit, please go ahead. Rohit Sisodia, you want to ask something?
Yes. So like we were discussing for objectivity, policy related with gifts, acceptance and all. So I have worked on few of the policies of some big firm. So they themselves have a code of conduct policy for their employees. And there they have listed out that the gift they have differentiated by materiality wise. So like price should not be 1,000 or 2,000. So if there is some festival occasion or a facilitation is going on in that scenario, if they are offering some gift, so can it be taken or we should deny that?
So I think that's a very good,
Can
again,
be.
a very good question that have been asked. Yeah, anyone who would like to answer?
I can.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So I think so there could be different situations in this. For example, if there's if we are part of any engagement and during that period there's for example a festival going on and the management distributes gifts and we are part of all of those employees. It's not that we are being given some special treatment. In that case, we can accept gift and the objectivity will not be impaired. Second, the value of the gift should also be at a non-significant value. Example, if there's a sales audit that we are reviewing or any such audit in which in which the gift value is way too much insignificant. For example, even if they are distributing pencils, and if the pencils would have our own names, which is very insignificant, in that case, the acceptance will not be impaired. The objectivity will not be impaired at the time of acceptance of that gift.
Yeah. Thank you, Alabia. So I think that's on spot what Alabia said. With we can probably accept those gifts as in those are available for everyone in the organization. Let's say during the occasion on Diwali or occasion on any festival, there's a gift distribution that happens in the organization. If that kind of gift is coming up, it's acceptable. But let's say if you're on a internal audit engagement and the client is arranging for an exotic vacation leave for yourself, in that case, we can't accept that gift. And it cannot be pre-facto, post-facto, or during the engagement. So that's how we see it.
Yeah, that I got Arpit, but like my concern is that if the gift will be governed by the company's code of conduct policy, or it will be
All
like
right. So
IIA
yes.
serving
So
something.
all right. So that's again a very valid question. So the way we have to read it, not only from a organization policy point of view, this is for all, and this is again a very valid question, very good question that Rohit have asked, folks. We would have covered sometime at a point of time, but it's good that this has been asked now. So what the IA says that whatever is more strict in nature, okay, let's say IA says that okay, this is what we need to follow, and let's say the other jurisdiction law says that this, which is more stricter, and that is that jurisdiction law needs to be followed. Let's say the IA policy says, IA code of ethics says that we don't accept gift of any material value, and let's say the company policy says that we can accept the gift of employees can accept the gift of so much value. Whatever is more strict in nature, we have to follow that. So that is how we have to see it. And the one that you're saying, gift, fee, and entertainment, this is for a group of set of people that can probably give normally during the business development exercise, can accept fee, can or make the payment for fee and use for entertainment. Normally that is the way we see it in the organization, right? So that's normally part of the code of conduct also related to gift, fee, and entertainment, and there is a separate policy also for that. Does that make sense? So we have to look for more stricter option.
Yeah, I got it. I completely got it. But one more thing is like when he told that if you are working as a part of that organization, but in my case, I'm in consulting and we work for external clients. So in that scenario, I'm not a employee of that firm or a part of that firm. So what should my responsibility?
My responsibility in that case, we should not accept the gift. Even if the organization policy says that we can accept the gift, we should not accept that.
Okay, but what about the materiality in that scenario? If it's a very low marginal value.
So as I said, if it's low marginal value, let's say we are auditing for a client, it's a occasion, it's a festival occasion. We are sitting on the office, everyone else like as a team, and they are offering that gift of immaterial value, which they're distributing to everyone. That's okay. That doesn't harm us. But if it's of a material value, if it is a special thing that is coming across, in that case, we should refuse to do that. Refuse to accept that.
And hi, this is Ritu. I just wanted to check. So if somebody is in a consulting role and working for another organization, so an organization I know has like a meals, gifts, and entertainment policy, but wouldn't the consulting firms also have a similar policy where auditors are required to make disclosures of what they're being offered as gifts? I think that can help in the consulting space, right? Where they can say that, you know, I'm bound by these policies and I will not accept the gift and make the disclosure accordingly.
That's true. That's true. That was Vibha, right? Sorry, that was Vibha, right? I didn't get your name, whoever was answering.
Oh, this is Ritu.
All right, Ritu. All right. Thank you, Ritu. Yeah, exactly. I think that would also depend on the organization policies if they have, like the consulting firm policies. Absolutely. Does it help answering, Rohit, your answer?
Yeah, Arpit, I got it.
All right, great. Thank you. Hey, Ishita, you have any question?
Yes, sir. मुझे ऑडिट का एक्सपीरियंस नहीं है, but still have a question on the confidentiality. Company has violated some laws and court has issued a notice to the company, and court didn't ask any question to the internal auditor. So is it a legal obligation to share the information? Or
it will be the legal obligation. So let's say if there is a court order against which we have to share the information, it's always good and it's always recommended that we kind of reach out to the legal team of the company or the general counsel of the company to take their views that this have been asked by the court. Should we share? How can we share it in a better way? Probably not. I'm not saying that we have to tamper that data set or tamper that information before submitting to the board, but I'm saying let's just take their advice in nature, and we can inform to the management and the board that yes, this has been against the summon or against the court order, and we can still go ahead and share it. So that is not going to violate. So if it is against the court order, if it is against the legal obligation, we have a legal obligation to do so, we can share the data that we have or the information that we have. Yes?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so are we good so far? Yes or no? Are you all with me? Everyone?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
All right. So good. So with that, we have kind of covered various examples. Let's cover a little bit more at length. So again, it starts with now each of that, all that we studied, basically folks, in the 1.3, we have kind of covered the internal audit ethics, introduction and principles. We have covered all this that we've talked about so far. And now we are moving into the detailed part of each of those aspect of internal audit ethics or code of ethics. Like we'll read 1.4 as code of ethics integrity, 1.5 as code of ethics objectivity, internal audit ethics competency and confidentiality. So that's what we're going to read in next four subunits, right? So there are 4 code of ethics. So we are going to read 4 of those subunits now. And that's going to be our target for now in the balance portion of the session time that we have. So let's read the first part, internal audit ethics, integrity, rules of conduct, integrity. We have already read this. So can I volunteer and who would like to read, or you all can read this together so that it gets more learned to you? Can you all read this together? Integrity, we already covered explanation on that, but just read this out, all of you together. Integrity, internal auditors, the 4 principles are?
Number 1, should perform their work with honesty, diligence, and responsibility. Shall observe the law and make disclosure
law
expected by law.
expected by the law
Shall not
profession, shall not
knowingly
knowingly be a party to an illegal
party
activity
to
or
any
engage in
illegal
acts that are discreditable to the profession of internal auditing and to the organization, shall respect and contribute to the legitimate and ethical objectives of the organization.
ethical objectives of the organization.
All right. So let's take first example, folks. Let's talk about, let's say we are at an audit of a factory or a plant, and we identify that there are certain child laborers working in the company. Now, let's say we have not made that disclosure, we have not reported to the organization. Can we say that we have violated integrity in that case?
Yes.
Yes. So we should observe the law and make disclosure expected by the law and the profession. Okay, we should not be. And let's say there is there's a pharmaceutical company for which we are auditing, and let's say we identify a note, or let's say there's a manufacturing unit that is kind of into manufacturing business, and when we are doing a plant walkthrough or a walkthrough of the operations, we identify or see some illegal activity going on. Let's say it could be related to environmental aspect, it could be related to a threat. Sorry, there's some disturbance. Can you all, whoever's not speaking, keep yourself on mute, please. Yeah. So let's say there is an illegal activity going on. Sorry, may I request whoever is not speaking, please keep yourself on mute. Yeah, let's say there is a illegal activity going on in that plant, and we have not reported it. Again, we in that case become a party to that illegal act. So we should not knowingly become a party to that illegal activity or engage in acts that are discreditable to the profession of internal auditing. We have covered various examples on integrity. Otherwise, from a discreditable point of view, we are lying. We are not even discreditable. It also includes if we are not doing work with due professional care. It also includes if we are not performing the work. We are taking the work which is not we don't have adequate knowledge, skill set. Those can also impact integrity, along with violating the competency clause as well. So that is how we have to read this. I think we're clear on the 4 principles, folks. Now this is where. Yeah, please go ahead.
Arpit, I have a question. In the context of integrity,
please call out your name. Yeah,
Suman Desai. In the context of integrity, the example that you took of child labor. So suppose, for example, it is also a regulatory requirement that an employee needs to pay twice the hourly wage rate for the overtime work. So if the organization is not paying twice the hourly wage rate, are they impacting integrity, or do they have to report?
We have to report. I mean, we have to report to the board and management. It doesn't say that we have to report to the external regulators. We have to our limited reporting is to the board. So that is how we have to see it. Let's say there is the example that you said that okay, there's the laborers needs to be paid overtime on twice the basic salary. and let's say we have identified that the organization is not paying it. If you're not reporting it, that is where we becoming party to that illegal act, or you're not making adequate disclosure that is expected by the law. So that is where we need to kind of report it to the management and the board. So that is how we have to see it. Yeah.
Hi, Arpit, it's Abhinav.
Please go ahead.
If there's some illegal activity going on in a firm and auditor is unable to find it out, and later
Unable is okay. And see, unable is, then it's a separate risk, right? So then we're talking about detective risk, then we're talking about audit risk, things like that. So that is something that we'll cover later, but that is separate, right? So that's a detective risk, right? So we are doing something, but we are unable to find out. So that's a detective risk that will always be there. And that's the reason to just circle upon and kind of summarize it, why we can't give absolute assurance. The reason everywhere that you will read the content, it says reasonable assurance. Audit internal audit function can give only reasonable assurance, not absolute assurance, only for this reason that there are variety, there are inherent risks, there are residual risks that are stayed. We can't give absolute assurance, we can't give 100% assurance because of these reasons. And detective risk could be for various reasons. It could be sampling issue, it could be time period, it could be coverage, it could be scope limitation, a variety of reasons could be there. But detective, if we are unable to find it, if we are not aware of it, then it's a separate point altogether. But if you're aware and we are not disclosing, that's where the problem comes in. Yeah?
Okay, got my answer. Thank you.
Jhandewalan, you want to add? You have any query? Please go ahead.
I have a query. Let's say an internal auditor has an observation which is not as per the ethical norms of maybe the environment, legal environment in which the organization is functioning, but it has given its report to the management and everything. Management is not accepting it due to their own some challenges. So like not being party to an illegal activity. Now, since I have given my opinion, my role ends here, right? Or should I just stay away from the organization, leave the organization?
This is good. Actually, this is good. These are very interesting questions. I'm honestly really happy with these questions coming up. The reason are two. As we move forward, actually, these are various aspects that we would have covered much later when we are going to talk about risk appetite of the company and stuff. But we're covering now, so this will become much more fundamental clarity when we move forward in our discussions. But that's a very good thought, Nupur, that you've shared. So see, the way I have to link at this point of time, if I have to answer you one simple way is, our role is limited to report to the management and the board. So if you have done it, it's fine. So that's where it ends. That's one answer of it. That's one leg of it. Now the second leg of internal audit function is also about understanding whether the actions have been taken by the management or not for the critical audit findings. So normally it is expected out of, and this is more part 2 question. Say a part 2 question that we're talking now in part 1, because it talks about all the performance standard, where one of the performance standard is also follow-up related aspect. So what is follow-up? It says that the standard says that when there are certain critical findings that could impact organization significantly, internal auditors should keep a tap on it more rigorously to kind of ensure whether the necessary actions have been implemented by the management to reduce the to take action to resolve the problem. Okay. So that's what the standard says precisely. Now let's say during our follow-up exercise, we got to know that management has just accepted this risk. Okay, which means that management has accepted that we can't take any action. Then we have to go back and see the risk appetite of the company, that whether the risk appetite of the company permits that or not, whether the risk tolerance of the company that is defined by the board or the audit committee or the risk committee, whether it is within the risk appetite of the company or the risk tolerance limit of the company. If it is there, then it is fine. But if it is not there, then we have to go to the management, to the board, and tell them, okay, first of all, we will have to go to the management and understand why you are not taking action. What are the reasons? And then we have to go back and again tell to the board that, okay, we have identified this problem. This is not within the risk appetite of the company. This is what management is saying. This is what they should do. And we should share both the perspective of management as well as the internal auditor. So that's a complete, basically, information that we need to kind of take the action. Does that help, Nupur?
So that means I need to be very clear in my reporting terms, and just to save myself in future. That is what I'm getting. And in case it is repetitive,
So the way I'm saying it is there are two ways of seeing it. Let's say one is that we have to kind of report it, right? So one is that we have to have a very transparent reporting mechanism in place. So which means, of course, if you're not reporting it, it would impair my objectivity. It could impair my integrity as well. Okay. Objectivity for a reason that it may distort the terminology that we have understood here, that shall disclose all material facts known to them, that if not disclosed may distort the reporting of activities under review. And the second is, let's say, from integrity point of view, because of the reason that we are not reporting what we have noted. So in order to safeguard that, we are saying that yes, we have to do it. But as I said, from a performance standard point of view, let's say if it is very critical to the organization and if it is beyond the risk appetite of the company, in that case, we have to kind of go back. It's not just limited to reporting to the management and the board. We have to go back and tell that, okay, as part of our follow-up exercise, when we have noted that there's no action taken up, we have to first discuss with the management that why you have not taken action. We need to understand, need to tell them that this is beyond the risk appetite of the company, and then go and again inform to the board that this is what the management says, this is our view, and kind of submit both the views there. So that close up the entire responsibility.
Arpit, Rohit here, just to add up on this. So as per my understanding, in such situations, in case if we during the period of audit, if we find any such issues, so first we will have to see what is the level of risk, whether it is at a high, low, or medium.
Yeah, that's what risk
and accordingly, or it is just an observation, something wherein things are working, but there are certain places wherein we need to kind of amend. So it can either become a point of discussion or it can become an issue. In case if it becomes a point of discussion, that's where during the meeting we will have to have a formal meeting with the client, explain them the things, and those things along with maybe a satisfactory report, putting an observation, since it is at a very insignificant level, we can ask them to kind of improve over a period of time, maybe during the next audit period when we kind of do the audit. Those things needs to be in line. In case if it is an issue, is where like normally a discussion needs to happen. A time period is normally provided to the entity to kind of rectify the issues, and then a retesting happens. In case if even during the retesting, if things are not happening, then from our end, the only way is to kind of issue an unsatisfactory report, adding the issue, which normally goes to the audit committee and to the board.
And one more thing I just wanted to add, Arpit, on this is that we also should be mindful of the fact that even for the same type of issue, because you have different audit periods and because of changing economic conditions, industry conditions, the risk appetite for the same type of issue can change. So what you found as satisfactory earlier may become unsatisfactory now. So they should be very cognizant of that, because you can't always have a constant risk appetite.
Absolutely. Oh, great. Yeah, Pramod, you want to go ahead? Rohit, you want to ask anything? Can I lower your hand? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, Pramod, you have to add something. You have some point.
Yeah. Just I have a question here. Can there be a situation where the CFO and the chief audit officer or the chief audit executive officer can be one and the same one?
CFO and ideally not. It should not be there. Yeah. So I got your point. Normally in companies, if there is no separate CAE, it's the CFO who take that role, kind of a joint role of both the things, getting the audit done. But in that, again, in all those cases, we have to kind of ensure this independence and objectivity piece more appropriately, such that it doesn't impact. But I'm getting where you're coming from, and that's what we've seen in many companies. But it's always encouraged to have a separate line of responsibility at a CAE level, and that should have a direct functional reporting to the board. Actually,
what does the role of internal auditor? I mean, an objectively internal audit. How do we do it within the same, under the same flag of owner of responsibility?
See, a lot of things can be considered in this, Pramod. So let's say one thing could be, let's say, let's take it a little bit more practical. Are you talking about the same company, internal audit team reporting to the CFO? Are we talking about the external agency coming and auditing for them, and whether SPOC is the CFO in that case?
Yeah. So the CFO and the CA. The
CFO and the CA is the same.
Is the same.
The internal audit team is within the organization, or it is outside?
Yeah, it's within the organization. Yes.
Okay, it's within the organization. I think the way we have to see it is that see, if it is a dual reporting relationship, one thing is for sure that the way it is seen is that, let's say the CFO and the CE is the same. In that case, all the activities where the CFO is responsible, it's not, their team member cannot do audit for that. Okay. So one thing is, again, this is again part of objectivity. Let's say whatever the supervisor is working, let's say if the supervisor is working on a supervisor is taking two roles. Let's say as you said, the person is taking a role of a CFO and the person is also taking a role of a chief audit executive. In that case, the team member should not his or her team member should not be taking assignments or auditing for the functions and areas where the CFO is involved. So that is one way to reduce the impairment of objectivity. The second is that whether it's an impairment of objectivity, if you ask me whether it's an impairment of objectivity, or it's an organization independence issue, I'll say that this is an impairment of organization independence issue because it's an organization was given the dual reporting relationship, was given the dual responsibility of two functions, which is CFO and CAE, and now the organization, it's an organization level impairment rather than an individual level impairment. But let's say the CAE or the CFO who is taking a single person taking two roles, if the person is asking his own team members or her own team members to kind of perform the audit, in that case it impairs the objectivity. So in that case, it's always preferable to reduce this. It's always preferable to hire an external independent firm to kind of audit on those areas.
Okay, I have one more question on 1.3 on the principles under 1.3.
1.3, you mean? Okay, from integrity point of view, yeah, please go.
Yeah. So if you can just go to page number 9, I mean, just a little above.
Yeah.
A little bit above, please.
Sure. You're saying here principles?
Yeah. So now these principles are integrity, objectivity, confidentiality, and competency. So are these principles in a necessary order, or is one principle has got higher relevance than the other, or
No. All of them are equally important. All of them are equally important, and you can say these are components of code of ethics. You can say these are elements of code of ethics, or these are individual code of ethics as well. So in fact, the way we have to read it is, under integrity we have 4 principles, which are these. Under objectivity we have 3 principles, which are these. This is how we have to read it.
So in case there is a question in the there's a question about which is the most important or critical role that the internal auditor should have, most important principle out of these 4.
No. It doesn't say like that. It will not ask the question like that. That which is more important, because all of them are equally important. These are part of the code of ethics, right? So we can't say that okay, one is working or one is not working. In fact, if you go back on our core principles, there also we have all these integrity, objectivity, and we said that we can only say internal audit effectiveness is when all the principles are being followed, right? All the core principles. So that is how we have to see it. We cannot say that okay, integrity is there but objectivity is not there, and then we can say internal audit is working effectively, or we can say what is more important. No, all of them are equally important. The examiner should not ask you these questions. I mean, this doesn't make sense.
Okay, Arpit. So maybe tomorrow when we do the MCQs,
We'll surely discuss that. Yeah.
Just a quick question, like for integrity part, if we are coming across some activity which is not a part of our scoping or like the formal charter which we have been authorized, so should we report that? In that case, should we report that to the board, or we should be quiet on that part because it's not a part of our scoping or something?
All right, so there are 2 things that we're mixing up. We are talking about charter and then we are talking about scoping documents. So charter tells about the type of engagements that we can do. Okay, charter tells, okay, we can do assurance, we can do consulting, we can do fraud forensic, or whatever it is. So fraud related aspects. So that is how the charter tells that what are the type of engagements that we can get into. The scoping is separate. Scoping is part of my risk-based employment plan, which says that, okay, these are the areas that we're going to audit. Okay, let's say you're saying that, okay, you have been to a plant and let's say the audit review is, let's say, quality control, and you're saying that in the production process there are child labors. Should we report it or not? I will say yes, we should do it, because this is something that you've kind of identified. We should still go ahead and report. We should not just take ourselves that okay, this is not part of the scope, so we'll not inform that. We should ideally inform it.
Sure, thanks.
Yeah. All right, very good. So great, folks.
No question. Sorry.
Yeah, please go ahead. No worries. I'm happy to answer as many.
Can the internal auditor also become a whistleblower in case he comes across a particular?
Yes, of course. Of course, internal auditors can
Even
take
if he's not,
so let's say,
even if he's not into that scope of auditing, if he can, if he finds out something, can he become whistleblower?
Yeah, of course. Why not? Person can become whistleblower. It's just that internal auditor will become whistleblower in his or her individual capacity, right?
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Arpit,
Auditor can
for
take a
that,
role of a whistleblower. Yeah.
But Arpit, in addition to that, for a whistleblower, internal auditor can't be whistleblower for external client firm. Na? It can be in their, if there are client, the company is having their own dedicated internal audit team. In that case, he can be an employee and he can be a whistleblower. But if he's doing external audits and his own client permissions, I don't think.
Who said that? Who said that, Rohit? So let's take an example. Let's say there is an organization in which there's a fraud that is going on. Now there are two choices that an internal auditor can take, or an auditor can take. Can be part of that, or can take a role of whistleblower in that case. I mean, see, there is a confidentiality which is there, of course, but the way we see it is. See, it depends, right? So we can't share the right set of information if it is going on. But let's say if it is there is something that the management itself is trying to fraud to the stakeholders. There are two things that either we report it to the right forum, if yes or no. My ethical work gets completed there, right? So my standards code of ethics completes there, that okay, we have to inform it to the management and the board. But if one has to take the role of in the individual capacity, the person can still go ahead and take the whistleblower. Whistleblower is more to highlight the fraud, right? So I think still the organization can take that role. I mean, individual can take that role. All that is that the person should not share should not disclose the information which is confidential in nature. Or also saying that it should go with the right place. I mean, let's say if the employed team believes that the management is not taking action, it should still try to kind of convince them, rather than just going and announcing it in the market. Because if that does, if the person is doing right away, let's say they are not discussing with the management, they're not discussing with the board, and they're just going outside and telling to the external stakeholders, then it is violating. But if it is all going through the right forum, there's no continuous action that has been taken place. I think the employer will probably may choose to not continue, may choose to not be party to that act, and may in the individual capacity may be a whistleblower too.
Yeah, exactly. That's the point. Like we can put in our report and our work will be done in that scenario. If we further we want to drag,
as I said, from a standards, code of ethics, responsibility, professional point of view, that is where we can limitize ourselves. We should not be party or to that act. Let's say if there is such engagements continued, and let's say despite explanation, all of it, there's no movement. And let's say this is more of a role of external auditors also, because ultimately it's the external audit team who has to kind of qualify that in the external audit, financial audit report. So in that case, even if they're not reporting, and let's say they have a management pressure on that way, they may choose to resign and then qualified it, right? So they should not be party to that.
Okay, yeah, got it. Thanks.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, Banav, please go ahead.
So in case a auditor of IT audit gets a lead of PNC feel that there's some fraud going on, so whether auditor should go as a whistleblower or should give the lead to his counterpart in PNC team.
PNC is basically
procurement team. For example, I'm just taking an example. IT auditor gets a lead that there is a fraud in PNC team, so he should pass it on to the PNC audit team, or should be a whistleblower.
No, it's ideally audit. So you're saying is IT audit independent of the
independent of PNC audit?
Independent
yes.
of the
independent.
But the team would be still part of the overall internal
audit team. Right? Yes, overall audit team. Yes.
So see, internal audit function will normally have different teams, right? So they will have different line of business auditing. They will have the IT audit separate team members. They will have a data analytics team member separately. So the way I see it, it's actually a joint responsibility. Eventually, it boils up to the same CAE, where the person should rather do a whistleblower should first inform to the chief audit executive, or should inform to his supervisor, who can take it up with the CAE. So that's the right way of hierarchy that one should follow, rather than doing a whistleblowing directly. Yeah.
Okay.
And more than that, one has to be surely. I mean, just doing whistleblowing doesn't make sense. One has to be surely confirm that yes, there has been an incident and there has been a fraud that has happened. And folks, this is where we will more emphasize later. But normally, when we assess and let's say we are suspicious about something, in case there is a fraud that is happening in the company, we can recommend investigation. So that's again one rule that we can take care of. Let's say there is a management level fraud that is happening, and we are being suspicious about it. We have adequate proofs to establish at an initial level. We can probably discuss that, report it to the board, and tell them that okay, based on this, we recommend investigation. Now it's board to take it up or not. Yeah. So our role ends in those ways. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So yeah. So that was interesting questions coming up. Anyone else? Any other queries? Are you all getting a lot of clarity in the concepts? Pashwati, Bashir, Ayushi. Are you all with me, folks? Bhumika, Govardhan?
Yes, yes.
Everyone?
Yeah,
Yes?
with you.
Rajesh, Rahul, Rakshit, Pramod is participating. Richa, both of you, Richa. We have not heard from you so far. Sundaram, are you with us? Sundaram Ramanathan?
Yes.
Vijay, all of you with us? Vijay Kuvar? Yes. All right, great, folks. So any other queries before we move forward? Are you all with me? Yes, no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. All right.
Yes.
So let's continue. I know we are just left with 15 minutes. So let's see where we are able to reach. So let's cover any other queries. Are we good to go so far? All right, so I'll continue. Rules of conduct, integrity, we have covered this. Now let's cover this. This is again a detailed explanation. It's now talk about further guidance on integrity is provided in implementation guidance, code of ethics, integrity. It says integrity is foundation of other three principles. Okay, so if it is talking about foundation, it is, yes, based on integrity, it is a foundation principle. So integrity is the foundation of other three principles in the IA code of ethics: objectivity, confidentiality, and competency. All depend on integrity. Integrity also underpins the standards. The CAE responsibility for implementing integrity includes the following. The CAE should cultivate a culture of integrity by acting with integrity and adhering to the code of ethics by himself or herself. The CAE also establish policies and procedures to guide the internal audit activities to show diligence and responsibility. The CAE may also emphasize the importance of integrity by providing training that demonstrates integrity and other ethical principles in action. For internal auditors, the best attempts to identify and measure integrity likely involve attitude awareness and understanding of the code of ethics, rules of conduct for integrity, the IPPF mandatory guidance, and the supporting practices. For internal auditors, behavior that may not be illegal but may be discreditable. Folks, this is again important. What are the examples of discreditable? As we covered, behavior that may be considered as bullying, harassing, or discriminating, failing to accept responsibility for making mistakes, issuing false report or permitting others to do so, lying, making claims about one's competency in a manner that is deceptive, false, or misleading, making disparaging comments about the organization, fellow employees, or its stakeholders, either in person or via media, in publication or social media posts, minimizing, concealing, or omitting observation or unsatisfactory conclusions and rating from engagement reports or overall assessments. So we are omitting observations and or giving unsatisfactory conclusions and ratings from engagement reports or overall assessment. Non-compliance with the standards or other IPPF mandatory guidance, performing employed services for which one is not competent, performing employed services with undeclared impairments to independence or objectivity, soliciting or disclosing confidential information without proper authorization, stating that the employed activities operating in conformance with the standards when the assertion is not supported by the results of quality assurance and improvement program. This is something that we'll cover in Unit 2, folks. So let's park it. But all of the above, if we are doing or overlooking illegal activities that the organization may tolerate or condone, using the CIA designation or other credentials after they have expired or been revoked. So all that may be discreditable to the profession. So that's something that we need to consider during violation, folks. Moving on to conformance with integrity that may be demonstrated by a QIP program. What is the QIP program? We'll hold on that thought at this point of time. We'll cover in detail in Unit 2. Forms of acknowledgement signed by individual employers demonstrates that employers have committed to follow the organization ethics policy or code of conduct, relevant laws and regulation, and the IA code of ethics and other IPPF mandatory guidance. Diligent supervision of engagement and performance of the self-assessment required by the standards to demonstrate the integrity of the employment activity as a whole. Now, this is just a quick example. It says that employer is working for a cosmetic manufacturer that may be inappropriately testing cosmetics on animals. If out of loyalty to the employer, no information about testing is gathered, the auditor violated the rule of conduct by knowingly become a party to an illegal act, engage in an act discreditable to the provision, failing to make disclosure expected by the law, and not performing the work diligently. Is that clear now? Are you clear with this example, what we were talking about? Yes? Yes. All right.
Yes.
All right, so moving on to internal audit's objectivity. Again, the objectivity principle is a lot of times asked in the examination. It clearly says on the success tip. Again, objectivity employers shall not participate in any activity or relationship that may impair or be presumed to impair the unbiased assessment. This participation includes those activities or relationships that may be in conflict with the interests of the organization, shall not accept anything that may be impair or be presumed to impair the professional judgment, shall disclose all material facts known to them, that if not disclosed may distort the reporting of activities under review. Again, it covers different examples. Now, this is again one very important example. Can I have a material ownership interest in my company and then do audit? So let's say if I am auditing for the organization where I also have a material interest, will that impair objectivity? Yes or no?
Yes.
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 So why it is getting, why can anyone tell me why it will impair the objectivity? Let's say if I have material interest in the organization that I'm working, how does that impact my objectivity?
We will audit for respective areas only where we have interest, and we'll try to cover the findings also accordingly.
And why we are doing that?
Conflict of interest.
Just to safeguard our interests which are in the particular materiality.
Yes. So let's take more practical example. Let's say that I have a material interest in a company which is listed on the stock exchange, right? Let's take that example. Let's say if there are very important audit findings that is there that can impact, if that rule out and that is being reported by the external auditors, or that comes out to the light to the stakeholders, that may impact my stock prices. So if I am having a material own interest, that may impair objectivity, right? Because I may choose not to disclose that for that reason. Does that make sense? Yes? No? Yes? Yeah, Nupur, you have a question you want to add?
I just want to understand, I don't have exact knowledge. What happens if I'm an employee and internal auditor in an organization and we are allocated ESOPs as per the organization policy? So is it
that becomes part of my CDC structure? I don't think so that will impact objectivity in that case. Okay. Because that's part of the CDC benefit that the organization want to pass on. But let's say if I'm auditor, during our course of business, we have kind of identified that the potential profits being reported in the organization, if passing that becomes an issue, right? So that's where the confidentiality gets.
But Arpit, here is a question, like the way you told the ESOPs has been provided, and we are knowing that the share price will be fluctuating a lot, and now we want to excise just before the activity. So that in that case, it will be conflict.
So normally there is a lock-in, Rohit, for that. Whenever there is ESOPs that are being issued by the organization, there will always be a lock-in, and then again, it will be always recommended not to use it in that way. So if you're doing that way, then it will violate. Yes.
No, but I'm saying just before any event is supposed to happen, or there will be a fluctuations happening, which we are just aware because we are internally working that company, and we know that. And before just price is being inflected, and we are just getting out of the stock in order to safeguard and excise our ESOPs. So I think that will translate to same kind of insider trading.
Yes, absolutely. And normally the way we have seen is normally there is a lock-in period that will be there. Let's say you have joined a company where you have appointed as an employer, and there will always be a lock-in of 3 years, 4 years before you can sell ESOP for that matter.
Yeah, that is.
All right. So let's quickly cover this. It says a material ownership. Now this is again important, folks. This is an important example. Let's say I have a material ownership in the competitor. And still in that case also I'm impairing the objectivity? Yes or no?
No.
In that case,
no.
Okay. Please remember, material ownership within the organization is impairing the objectivity. Material ownership in a competitor is allowable. Okay. Tell me one example, folks. If I am also a service provider to the organization, so I am a chief audit executive or I'm into the employee team, I'm also a vendor for the company. Is it impairing the objectivity?
Yes, then it will be.
Then it will be.
Let's say not give vendor to the company, right? If you're an auditor.
Yeah, the employee team member is also the vendor to the company, and the employer is also the employer for the company. In that case, we'll impair the objectivity. Yeah.
Even any related party in that scenario will also be that same.
Yes. So that will again be a conflict of interest point. Yeah, Nupur, go ahead, please.
How come in business sense am I allowed to have a material ownership in competitor? Like I'm working in Realme and I have some ownership in Xiaomi mobiles. then I mean the employer will be thinking like I'm leaking their secrets of pricing, discount models, and everything.
That will be more of a business call, Nupur, to take rather from a IA standpoint of view. But at the same time, see, as an employee, ideally those material interests in the competitors would be requested by the organization to kind of disclose. And I think that will be part of your employer-employee agreement.
So, like in relation to the question she has asked, like if it's a competitor firm, it's a listed firm, then we can obviously purchase its shares and all. So it should not be that scenario.
Yeah. And that depends also, that also depends on the kind of activity the one is playing a role there, right? So we have just buying the shares. That's one aspect of it. The second is being part of the board meetings, being part of the day-to-day discussion with the management. So that is also needs to be considered the way we are seeing that aspect. So I think that we need to assess that from a holistic point of
view. Okay.
Yeah. Alabhi, you want to ask some question? Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, I actually wanted to add one thing, what Nupur asked. So I think that, so she said that, example, I'm a Realme employee and if I'm having interest in Xiaomi phone, so I might be, presume that I'm leaking the discounts or whatever. So I think, for example, in that case of an external auditor, or even if we are providing any such service externally, in that case, like example, if I'm a Realme employee and if I'm auditing anything which is their competitor or anyone, and if I'm having any material interest or even shares, at that point of time we cannot audit them, because like example, if I'm working in a consulting firm, even as an external auditor or even as internal auditor, and if we have to provide any external audit service or consulting service to a firm who already have interest with the current firm in which I am working, at that point of time, either I will have to opt out of that particular engagement, or I have to sell off my materiality, like the shares.
Yeah. So it's more to get into that organization to audit that, right? That's what you're saying.
Yeah,
so that's part of the independent survey form also that continue to happens as part of the organization especially from a consulting firm point of view. They do share a annual independent survey form. They do share independent survey forms before they're getting into the engagement all across the stakeholders, so that they can accordingly plan and they can communicate and the people can disclose. I think that's a good point that you highlighted.
Right, that is actually in the disclosure and independence form, because I worked in the independence team itself, so I was able to recall that this was basic and the topmost independence check that had to be performed. So
right.
I thought to add.
No, that's good. That's good. All right, so let's cover the last part, and maybe we'll cover till here, and we'll touch base the balance point once again in the next session. So I don't want to rush on this. We would like to still read the entire content in detail one by one. So let's cover the last piece. It says a material ownership interest in a competitor is allowable. Please take a note of this. This is important. Employers seldom can, during the course of employment, take action to enhance the value of the ownership interest. For example, if the management override of an important control creates exposure to a material risk, the employer is ethically obligated to report that matter to the senior officials charged with performing the governance function, which is the board, trustees, or whatever. Disclosure is not limited by time constraints. Employer cannot. Now, this is again important, folks. This is again important. All right, so let's try to understand this. Can we assure anonymity? So let's say during our internal audit exercise, let's say someone comes up and tell that okay, there is a potential fraud that is going on. Let's say we are on we are doing certain review in corporate office, and let's say out of somewhere some person knows that okay, these are the employers. We should inform that there is a fraud going on in the company. And that person come and inform, that person come and tell to the internal auditor that, okay, I'm telling you, but please maintain confidentiality, that please don't call out my name that I have informed. So can I assure anonymity to a person? Yes or no?
No, we can try, but we can't assure.
We can try, we cannot assure. So internal auditors cannot assure anonymity. Please remember that. That's again important. We can always tell them that, okay, we will try not to disclose, we'll try to keep it confidential, but we cannot assure anonymity. There's another...
Arpit, we can ask him to be a whistleblower in that case. His anonymity will be maintained.
Yeah, so that's a different way. Like we can always guide, we can always say that you can report it to ombudsman, you can raise it as a whistleblower as well. Yeah, so that can be done. But if we get to know, then in that case, again, we have to kind of take into consideration whether whatever we have received the information is correct or not, should consider during our reviews, and accordingly, let's say report. But we cannot assure anonymity, right? So this is again important. It says internal auditors cannot assure anonymity. Information communicated to an internal auditor is not deemed to be privileged. However, promising merely to attempt to keep the source of the information confidential is allowed. Right. So disclosure is not required when the internal auditor gathers sufficient information to dispel the suspicion of fraud. Now, this is again important. Let's say we have kind of identified, or we have kind of been suspicious about a fraud that is going on, but let's say it's just a suspicion. But before the audit committee or before the management reporting, we kind of went into detail of understanding or deep dive into the suspicions, the activity that we were suspicious about, and we kind of got a comfort that there is no fraud going on. In that case, we can dispel it. It's not that we, in that case, we not impair objectivity. Okay, so disclosure is not required when internal auditor gathers sufficient information to dispel the suspicion of fraud. And then we have the CA should share information and coordinate activities with other internal and external providers of relevant assurance and consulting services. After this, we have again conflict of interest policy. So folks, we all understand what is conflict of interest. This is the conflict of interest policy should prohibit the transfer of benefits between an employee and those with whom the organization deals. Right. Then we have various examples on the violation of rule of conduct, which is on 2.1, 2.2, 2.3. If you have 9:30, are you good to cover? Because if we start this, we'll have to kind of spend more than 10 to 15 minutes if you want to extend. Otherwise, we can cover it in the next session tomorrow and cover the balance content. Do you want me to cover that? You want to complete that? Or we can take it up once again from a revision mode in the next session.
Let's call it a day, sir.
Yeah, I know it's already been 4 hours. Yeah. So no worries. I think it was a great conversation. It was a I hope are you all clear with whatever we have studied? Let's just, before we wrap up the session, let's go back and see on this slide. Are we, after today's extensive time that we've spent on, are you now clear with applicable guidance? Are you clear on the context of what we are studying? Are you clear on fundamentals on what is mission, what does IPPF contains, mandatory guidance, standards, various types of standards, the 4 types of code of ethics, the principles, what are the various examples broadly? Are you clear on those aspects? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. So what is the primary purpose of code of conduct? Promote ethical
culture.
Right. And to enhance code of ethics, it should provide disciplinary
actions for violators.
Right? All right, perfect. So we'll take a quick, we'll close out today's session, and maybe tomorrow in the next session, what we'll do is we'll quickly cover the balance content. We'll do the things to remember, and then we will move to the practicing the MCQs if time permits. Otherwise, we'll do the MCQs in the next session. All right. So with that, thank you so much for joining in. See you all in the next session. Thank you. Take care.